handle. And we do see that 30-year yield up 2 basis points back above 2%. 2.02 handle is what we're looking at. Yield steady in Europe. The 10-year bund yield goes nowhere, negative 43. The 10-year gilt yield barely budges as well on a 52 handle. But we did see a bit of a sell-off in the Asian session in cable. Taking a look now, we're still down 0.4%, 131.49. Elsewhere in G10, you're seeing the Aussie dollar outperform, interestingly. So you can see it's quite an interesting risk asset reaction, even with what we've seen in China. The yen is also retreating somewhat as well. So really, it doesn't look very risk-off when you look across other assets. Taking a look at oil, that is slightly down. WTI down 0.2%, 51.48. Brent at 56.27, down 0.6%. An interesting call out there from Citigroup on oil. It doesn't see an oil revival from the virus until the fourth quarter. They've cut their first quarter oil estimate to $54 a barrel from 69. Roger.
Okay, well, let's pick up on what stocks are to watch this morning. And Bloomberg's Sam Unstead has joined us in our London studio. Sam, good morning. Now, first of all, Ryanair, we were talking to the CFO earlier on the programme. Bit of a winter profit, but the 737 MAX issue looms large.
It does indeed, but I think overall this is pretty positive for Ryanair. So bear in mind that they raised their profit forecast prior to the results coming out, so some of that was already baked in. But the shares are up just over 3% this morning, because I think the comments that they made, that they may see an increase in people staying closer to home, so avoiding the long-haul flights is boosting them. You can also see EasyJet is a little bit higher today, TUI as well, who operate some European flights. So that seems to be adding to the positivity of what was ultimately actually a pretty good set of results.
Now, we heard from Julius Baer, latest European bank, reporting earlier this morning, and some job cuts on the way.
Yeah, some quite hefty job cuts and kind of a retooling of their targets. So they missed to a certain extent on margins. They're now retooling that. They're retooling where they're going to expand, which they've been doing a lot in the last few years, but they're changing where they're going to do that. Latin America is their main aim now. And overall, investors just taking a breath, basically, with Julius Baer. Shares down just over 2% this morning. And I think probably that will start to recover a bit, assuming that the management can sell everyone on the strategy.
And lastly, European M&A, European payment sector, bit of consolidation. Worldline to buy Ingenico.
Yes, indeed. So this is a story that's been going for the last couple of years. A lot of smaller payments companies in Europe have been merging in order to compete, with larger payments companies in the US, but also to try and take advantage of this huge e-commerce opportunity that exists for payment processing companies. And I think, as you would probably expect, Ingenico shares higher, although quite a way below the offer, the essential offer price. They're up about 8% at the moment, and Worldline are falling. They're down about just under 7% at the moment. So we'll see how that pans out for the remainder of the day.
All right, Sam, thanks very much. Sam Unstead there joining us with stocks to watch this morning.
Let's also check on Siemens Healthineers, because, of course, that first quarter adjusted EBIT missed estimates, and we've seen the stock open lower, down 5.4%. It did drop as much as 8% straight off the open, which at that big drop was actually the biggest drop ever, Roger.
Right, well, let's move on to our big stories, our top stories. China grappling with the expanding coronavirus outbreak, of course. The number of official cases jumping to more than 17,000, and the number of dead in China is now more than 360. With the latest, Bloomberg's Selena Wang reports from Beijing.
Anxiety has been escalating, with more evidence that people may transmit the disease without obvious signs of infection. Over the weekend, a 44-year-old man from Wuhan died in the Philippines as a result of the disease, which is the first known death outside of China. Airlines in Asia, Europe, and the Middle East have stopped service to the mainland, and more countries have blocked arrivals from China, with the Philippines and New Zealand the latest to prevent travelers from China from entering. The U.S. Department of Homeland Security has also said U.S. flights carrying citizens who visited China will be redirected to designated airports to be screened for possible coronavirus symptoms. In Beijing, I'm Selena Wang, Bloomberg, Daybreak, Europe.
And as I was mentioning at the top of the hour, Chinese markets plunging the most since 2015, with trading resuming after an extended holiday. The CSI 300 dropped as much as 9%. At the last count, many stocks immediately fell by the 10% daily limit, almost 3,500 at the last count. And the yuan also tumbling to weaken past 7 per dollar.
But the PBOC weighing in, Beijing injecting over $21 billion in liquidity to calm markets. The measures, which include repos, may help mitigate investor concern as the outbreak spreads, but they weren't enough to compensate for the fallout over the last week.
And China's oil demand has plunged by about 20%. Executives privately described to Bloomberg the scale of the demand shock caused by the coronavirus outbreak. The drop by about 3 million barrels a day is probably the largest the market has suffered since the financial crisis.
And let's stick with oil because OPEC and its allies are considering how to respond to the latest plunge. Russia now saying it's open to Saudi Arabia's push for an emergency meeting this month. The delegate said the potential dates for such a gathering are February the 8th to the 9th, February the 14th to the 15th as well, although for now the next regular meeting on March the 5th to 6th remains on schedule.
And Boris Johnson is set to deliver a tough message to Brussels as talks begin to determine the UK's future trading relationship with the EU. Britain is pushing for a Canada-style arrangement, as Bloomberg Westminster's Sebastian Salek reports.
The UK side is determined to begin these talks holding tight to the key promises of Brexit, not signing up to EU single market rules or accepting the jurisdiction of the European Court. The Prime Minister says the UK will prosper even without a deal, and those words have revived fears that Britain could be in a no-deal situation this time next year. The EU chief Brexit negotiator, Michel Barnier, is due to set out his planned negotiating position in Brussels shortly after the Prime Minister's speech. These are opening positions, but everyone understands that it will be a difficult process on a tight timetable. In London, I'm Sebastian Salek, Bloomberg Daybreak Europe.
And for more on what the different trade arrangements could mean for business, tune into Bloomberg Westminster at 12 noon UK time. Today we're speaking to the British Chambers of Commerce Director General, Adam Marshall, also to the Lib Dem mayoral candidate for London, Siobhan Benita. Of course, the mayoral election's coming later this year. That's at 12 noon on London DAB, or you can catch the podcast later on Apple Music or on your preferred radio app.
Those are your top stories. For the latest in global news, here's Bloomberg's Leanne Gerrans. Hi, Leanne.
Good morning, Naira. Let's start here in the UK. The man shot dead by armed police in Streatham in South London on Sunday after stabbing two people is said to have been under active surveillance. Sudesh Amman had only just been released from prison for terrorism offences. Home Secretary Priti Patel says the government will announce further plans later for fundamental changes on dealing with terrorism offences.
Those measures would build upon ending the early release of counter-terrorism offenders. It's right that these individuals are kept behind bars, and we need to stop their early release from prison.
Staying in the UK, the Scottish Government's push for a new referendum on separating from the UK has got a boost from Donald Tusk. The former president of the European Council says there would be widespread enthusiasm in the EU if Scotland applied to rejoin the bloc. That's after independence.
Emotionally, I have no doubt that everyone will be enthusiastic here in Brussels and more widely, more generally also in Europe.
However, his comments to BBC's Andrew Marr drew criticism from Dominic Raab. The Foreign Secretary says Donald Tusk's interference is irresponsible. Crossing over to Hong Kong, thousands of medical professionals have begun a 5-day strike. That's today. This comes as the government refused their demands to shut all entry points from China, despite the coronavirus outbreak on the mainland. Medical workers signed up to demonstrate after talks between a local medical union and the city's hospital authority reportedly failed. Authorities have activated a major incident control center to monitor that situation. And now to the US. In Iowa, candidate Bernie Sanders is leading in a key poll of Democrats. Emerson College has a support at 28%, followed by Joe Biden on 21%. But a number of factors complicate the poll results. Caucus goers whose favorite candidate doesn't attain 15% of support can pick a fallback choice. And about 1/3 of voters say they could still change their allegiance. Global News 24 hours a day, on air and on Quick Take by Bloomberg, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. I'm Leanne Gerrans. This is Bloomberg. Roger.
Leanne, thank you. Now, coming up on Bloomberg Daybreak Europe, Chinese markets have plunged as they came back online following the Lunar New Year. We have the changing markets in Europe responding to that in different ways because the spreading coronavirus is still causing much fear out there. We'll be talking about the outbreak with Jimmy Whitworth. He's the academic lead on the UK's Public Health Rapid Support Team. They're at the moment, of course, working to deal with people who've been flown in from Wuhan by the Foreign Office. This is Bloomberg.
Asset managers who seize change to launch new strategies, add distribution channels, or exploit new technology to re-engineer the investor experience are often rewarded. However, in an industry paralyzed with complexity, few act with agility or decisively. Few run their business strategically. Yet, the most competitive managers in the market know with the right partner and a flexible operating platform, you can. Go boldly toward change with SEI Investment Manager Services.
I'm Steve Meyer, president of SEI's Investment Manager Services. At SEI, we understand the emerging forces that will define success for asset managers and what firms will need to compete tomorrow. That's why we continually optimize SEI's global operating platform. If your business requires greater agility, our advanced technology, integrated best-in-class systems, and multi-asset expertise can be your catalyst for business transformation.
With SEI Investment Manager Services, you lead the charge in a competitive marketplace. Learn more at SEIC.com/seize change.
More than just a game, baseball is big business. For the Chief Revenue Officer of the New York Mets, this means overseeing complex operations, key financial drivers, and interpreting data to make critical decisions every day.
How is your business managing complexity? Cohn Resnick can help you improve performance through an integrated business planning strategy that optimizes your data, streamlines processes, and keeps you ahead of the competition. Explore more at cohnresnick.com/MLB. Cohn Resnick, Advisory Assurance Tax. Transform your game.
To buy your home, you became a house hunting ace, learned about loans, scoured neighborhoods, and asked the right questions. Now you're queen of your castle. If you manage that, you can get your retirement plan on track. Visiting aceyourretirement.org can help. With 401k tips and smart saving strategies, you'll feel empowered to own your retirement like you own your home. Go to aceyourretirement.org. Because when it comes to clearing financial hurdles, you're an ace. Brought to you by AARP and the Ad Council.
Influential conversations from Bloomberg Television. Here's Youssef Kamel El-Din.
Double Line CEO Jeffrey Gundlach says he now sees a 90% chance for a Fed rate cut this year. Christine Todd, head of fixed income for the U.S. at Amundi Asset Management, is with us. The Fed is already accommodative. We got 75 bips of reductions in 2019. It's not really a lot more the Fed can do here.
If you look at the dots, the Fed is anticipating actually a hike in 2021. And the terminal rate to be about 2.5%. The market is pricing in 25 basis point cut in the end of this year, moved up from December to November based on the coronavirus, and another 25 basis point cut the following year. Based on our bullishness of the consumer, small business sector, accommodative Fed, presidential policy, which importantly instituted a major tax cut and has decreased the cost of regulation to businesses from about $120 billion to almost zero. And this is all very stimulative, and we see, signs of inflation percolating. We don't see that the Phillips curve is dead at all. So we would disagree with Gundlach, and we would be more steady and take a longer-term view in terms of the economic strength and stability.
Hear more interviews like this one on Bloomberg Television, streaming live on Bloomberg.com and on the Bloomberg mobile app, or check your local cable listings.
Markets, headlines and breaking news 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, the Bloomberg Business app, and on QuickTake by Bloomberg. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
From Bloomberg's European headquarters in London, I'm Sandra Kilhoff. Time for a Bloomberg Radio Business Flash. Now over to the First Word breaking news desk in Berlin. For today's morning call, here's Richard Jones.
Good morning, Sandra. The story for Asian equities today has been dominated by the sharp slide in Chinese markets, open for the first day after the extended closing period last week. The Shanghai Composite closed lower by 7.7%, with other regional indices across Asia mixed. The Nikkei 225 closed lower by 1%, while the Kospi traded little changed. The Hang Seng reversed early losses to trade higher by 0.2%. The E-mini S&P and the E-mini Nasdaq futures are both reversing a portion of the sharp sell-off seen in the U.S. cash equity markets on Friday, with the S&P E-minis up 0.4% and the Nasdaq E-minis up 0.6. European equities are all inching higher this morning, with the Euro Stoxx 50, the DAX, the CAC 40, and FTSE 100 all trading higher by 1 to 0.3%. Turning to the bond markets, the U.S. 10-year yield is 2 basis points higher at 1.53%, while the 10-year German bond yield is steady at minus 0.43%. In the FX space, the Bloomberg Dollar Index is trading higher by 0.1%. In terms of European economic data, we get a handful of manufacturing PMI releases for January today, some of which are final readings. Spain's number came in slightly lower than expected. The release is still to come this morning from Switzerland, Italy, France, Germany, the Eurozone, and the UK. In terms of central banks, you get the weekly Swiss sight deposits data today, in addition to the ECB's Guindos speaking this morning and Christine Lagarde attending a reception in Frankfurt this evening. That's it from me. For more macro breaking news, it's SQUA Go on the Bloomberg terminal. Sandra?
Thanks, Richard. That's a Bloomberg Business Flash. Now here's Leanne Garens with more on what's going on around the world.
Sandra, thank you. Syrian government forces have killed 4 Turkish soldiers and wounded 9 others. This is the deadliest direct clash between the neighbours in the northwestern province of Idlib that could fuel tensions. Turkey's army returned fire after sustaining casualties as a result of intense shelling by troops loyal to Bashar al-Assad. French President Emmanuel Macron is visiting Poland later today. This is in an effort to reset frosty relations at a time when Britain's departure from the European Union is reshaping political alliances in the 27-member bloc. The two countries have clashed over issues ranging from climate change policy and NATO. In an attempt to strengthen ties, he will propose new investment plans. And finally, World War I drama 1917 was the biggest winner at last night's BAFTAs. It took home 7 prizes, including Best Picture and Best Director. Other winners included The Joker, The Irishman, and Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. But the award ceremony was overshadowed by criticism of the lack of diversity among nominees. Global News 24 hours a day, on air and on Quick Take by Bloomberg, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. I'm Leanne Garens. This is Bloomberg Naira.
Leanne, thank you. That criticism keeps coming back and back for all kinds of award ceremonies, but nothing seeming to change yet.
Absolutely. I think we have seen it this time, and obviously there was, like, we've seen it time and time again, like you mentioned, and I don't really know what to say in the way of change. You know, we've been calling for diversity for so long, and it seems that everybody's on the platform for it.
Yeah, thank you so much, Leanne Garens with the World News. Now, let's get back to our top story with Chinese equity markets plunging as they return from the Lunar New Year holiday to the widening coronavirus crisis. The death toll rising to 360, more than 360, with more than 17,000 confirmed cases in China. For more, we're joined by Jimmy Whitworth, Professor at the London School for Hygiene and Tropical Medicine and academic lead for the UK's Public Health Rapid Support Team. Welcome to the show, Jimmy. Great to have you with us. Tell us what you've been doing in terms of the UK's Public Health Rapid Support Team, particularly since we had the WHO designate this a public health emergency of international concern. Have you stepped up moving UK citizens out of Wuhan or anything of that sort?
At this stage, what we're doing is we're talking with WHO and we're looking at whether we can provide some additional international expertise to help particularly Chinese authorities to be dealing with coordinating the outbreak that we have at the moment. With my colleagues at the London School of Hygiene and Tropical Medicine, we've been looking at the numbers that we have and trying to assess what the scope and the severity of this outbreak might be in China and in other countries.
Well, Jimmy, let me pick up on that, because a number of people have raised the suggestion that while we're obviously extremely concerned, and there is have been, we think, more than 360 deaths in China so far, but out of 17,000 established cases, many people are saying, is this not an overreaction to something that, while obviously difficult, is not necessarily a huge threat, and certainly not globally?
Well, that figure represents something like 2% mortality on the cases that we have at the moment. The issue is really, how big is this epidemic going to get? Because 2% of a large number is a large number. You know, if we're talking about an excess of tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of additional deaths, then that is going to be very serious for society and the future.
How concerned are you about containment in the UK itself? Are we likely to see a lot more cases crop up in the UK?
It's hard to predict at this stage. I think we are likely to see more cases in the UK, but I think what is really key here is robust public health measures as quickly as you can. When the numbers are small, it's much easier to be able to control it. When you have a situation like in China, where you've got thousands of people who are infected, you really do need the very robust public health measures that they've got in an attempt to control this.
And also, is it an issue now where the particulars of this, which means it's not detectable at a very early stage, make it more of a threat generally?
Yes, it does make it more of a threat, because that means that you really have no indication of whether somebody might be transmitting this or not. If they're able to be infectious before they actually start to show symptoms themselves, even if it's only by a day, then that makes it harder to actually control. And it means that the detective work involved in identifying and following up contacts of cases is even more important.
Great to have you with us. Thank you so much. Jimmy Whitworth, Professor at the London School for Hygiene and Tropical Medicine and Academic Lead for the UK's Public Health Rapid Support Team. Appreciate your time on the programme. We're 25 minutes into the equity market open, Roger, and we were saying earlier how the risk-off reaction has largely been contained to Chinese equity markets, but the Stock 600, while opening in the green, has now given up its gains to trade pretty much flat.
And coming up on Bloomberg Daybreak Europe, we're going to be talking about Brexit. We may have left, but the battle is far from over. This is Bloomberg.
This is a Bloomberg Money Minute. Wall Street may be in for another wild ride this week as worries about the coronavirus and its economic impact keep investors on edge. Many analysts see it as a short-term crisis. Jack Caffrey at JP Morgan Private Bank says if you're bailing out of the market, you may live to regret it.
I think if you take not a 2 to 3 week view, but instead maybe a 12-month view, this is probably going to be seen as a buying opportunity in hindsight.
Investors could be distracted from their coronavirus fears this week with the government's January employment report due Friday. Univision is having a hard time finding a buyer. Hemisphere Media and Liberty Global no longer plan to bid on the Spanish-language broadcaster. Univision has set a deadline of early this week to field offers. Before they say I do, many young couples are saying I did. Pay off their student loans. A USA Today study finds about a third of 18 to 34-year-olds say they have or will postpone their wedding until their student debt is gone. Larry Kofsky, Bloomberg Radio.
Are you interested in a challenging and exciting career? One where you can be part of solving complex challenges across industries and geographies? Bloomberg's ever-expanding technology, data, news, and media services foster innovation, empower clients, and offer nearly limitless opportunities for career growth. Visit Bloomberg.com/careers today to view our current job opportunities. Bloomberg LP is an equal opportunity employer. The address once again is Bloomberg.com/careers.
Portfolio Analyst, powered by Interactive Brokers, helps sophisticated investors understand the health of their complete financial portfolio. Portfolio Analyst is free and easy-to-use personal finance software that creates a consolidated view of banking, brokerage, and credit card accounts. Compare your consolidated portfolio against more than 200 benchmarks or create customized benchmarks for analyzing performance. Calculate time and money-weighted rates of return and use Portfolio Analyst for forecasting. Sign up for free at portfolioanalyst.com.
Business is
keys. Check. Phone. Check. 70s playlist downloaded. Check. Nice. There's one more thing you should check before you leave. Your travel. There's a new cycleway under construction between Kensington Olympia and Brentford Town Centre, so expect delays due to lane closures at the junction of Kew Bridge Road and Chiswick High Road. Plan ahead at tfl.gov.uk. To the Mayor of London and TfL, every journey matters.
It's already chilly in London, and you know that dodgy boiler is on its last legs. So if the thought of no heating makes you break out in a cold sweat, talk to British Gas. You can spread the cost of a new boiler interest-free over 2 years and get £200 off when you get a quote by the 29th of February, or £400 off for existing home care customers. British Gas, here to solve. Search British Gas new boiler. Conditions apply.
Good morning, this is your Southern service to London Victoria. Join in our onboard quiz. Here's our next clue. What C sounds like a handheld party food but keeps you dry and protected from the rain? Not canapes, canopies.
At Southern Railway, we're investing over £7 million into making improvements for you, like canopies, cycle parking and new platform lighting across more of our stations. Find out more and book your tickets at southernrailway.com. Southern Railway, we're with you.
5 is in! What a run! Touchdown, Kansas City!
Congratulations to the Kansas City Chiefs on winning their first Super Bowl in 50 years and second in franchise history.
50, Watkins, 10, chase to the 5, into the end zone, touchdown! That may be all she wrote!
While the NFL's 100th season may be over, football never stops on TuneIn. Search NFL Podcast to stay current with all the off-season wheeling and dealing.
And get ready for the 2020 NFL Draft in April.
Are you curious what others are listening to on TuneIn? Head to the trending section under Browse to see the most popular stations and podcasts among TuneIn listeners right now. Check it out. You might just discover something new for yourself.
Right now, instead of hearing this, you could be listening to the music that keeps you moving with TuneIn Premium. Find today's biggest songs and all of your favorites commercial-free. Visit TuneIn.com/premium to upgrade.
Go courtside with the NBA on TuneIn. With the NBA on TuneIn, hear your favorite team and players take on their biggest rivals during the biggest games throughout the year, including regular season showdowns, the 2020 All-Star Game, and the NBA Finals in June, featuring the home and away calls for all 30 teams. Plus, with the NBA on demand, relive the best moments of the season by listening to the past games in their entirety. Listen to the NBA all season long on TuneIn.
To New York, Bloomberg 1130. To Washington, D.C., Bloomberg 99.1. To Boston, Bloomberg 106.1. To San Francisco, Bloomberg 960. And around the globe, the Bloomberg Business app and BloombergRadio.com. This is Bloomberg Daybreak Europe.
8:30 a.m. in London, 9:30 if you're listening in Paris, Frankfurt or Brussels. Good morning, everyone. I'm Naira Chehich.
And I'm Roger Hearing, and you're listening to Bloomberg Daybreak Europe.
30 minutes into the equity market open here in Europe. We're just awaiting GDP data from Hong Kong, and the number has dropped a contraction year on year in the fourth quarter of 2.9%. It's not quite as bad a contraction as was expected. The expectation was for a contraction of 3.9%. What we get is a contraction of 2.9% in the fourth quarter. In terms of, we get another reading for 2019, that's a contraction of 1.2%. Again, not quite as bad as the expectation of a drop of 1.4%. And quarter on quarter for the fourth quarter, the number is also not quite as bad as expected, but we are still looking at negative numbers for Hong Kong's GDP. Really a perfect storm of economic risks for Hong Kong's horizon. Coronavirus, of course, adding to the trade war and protests. We know the economy was already in recession in 2019. That has very much been confirmed right now, shrinking in the second and third quarters. And it looks like that has continued in the final 3 months of the year. That said, the Hang Seng was trading in the green for a lot of the Asian session, still just about eking out some green on the screen, whereas elsewhere we saw a lot of red, particularly in China, where equities dropped the most by 2015. The yuan weakened through 7. Chinese markets reopening, of course, so we're getting the first reaction to the coronavirus, and even with the PBO stepping in with rate cuts and an liquidity injection, that didn't do much to stop the sell-off. In terms of elsewhere, Europe, 32 minutes into the equity market open, we opened in the green after closing down more than 1% on Friday, so we did snap 2 days of losses, but right now we've given up the gains to trade absolutely flat on Europe's equity benchmark, the Stock 600. In terms of how industry groups are distributed on the Stock 600 right now, so you would expect there to be a little bit of a mix, and that is what we're seeing. Travel and leisure, tech and food and beverages outperforming to the upside. Commodity producers and oil and gas underperforming. Elsewhere, in terms of regional equity benchmarks, CAC 40's flat, the DAX edges into the green, IBEX is in the green, the FTSE 100 up 0.1%, the FTSE MIB is flat. We saw the S&P 500 in the US on Friday erase its 2020 gains, closing lower. Dow, S&P and NASDAQ futures all on the front foot. The 30-year Treasury yield dropping below 2% for the first time since October on Friday. We're back above it again, and yields moving up across the Treasury curve. The 10-year Treasury yield up 1.5 basis points on a 153 handle. 10-year bond yield steady, so is the gilt yield. The pound's been underperforming in G10 as the UK and EU start their trade negotiations, and oil slightly on the back foot with a pretty bearish call from Citi out there. WTI at 51.45, Brent at 56.21.
Okay, well, let's move on to some of today's top stories. And China's trying to come to grips with the spreading coronavirus outbreak. Chinese stocks plunged the most since 2015, as we've heard. It was the first day of trading after the extended Lunar New Year holiday. The central bank pumped money into the system to assure liquidity. Meanwhile, the number of cases of the disease in China has soared past 17,000 and more than 360 people have died. And the Philippines has reported the first death outside China.
To get back to oil, that call from Citi is as follows. It doesn't see an oil revival from the virus until the fourth quarter. They've slashed their price forecast, cutting the first quarter oil estimate to $54 a barrel from $69, saying the impact of the coronavirus is deeper and longer than initially thought. They've also cut price forecasts for other commodities, reducing their first quarter copper projection by almost a fifth. But on oil, China's demand for crude oil is also said to have plunged 20% due to lockdowns tied to the coronavirus outbreak. OPEC and its allies are considering a response, and Russia has signalled openness to an emergency meeting for the first time. Bloomberg's Susanna Palmer reports.
The next regular meeting is on the schedule for March 5th and 6th, but an OPEC delegate says that could be brought forward to as soon as February 8th and 9th. OPEC and non-OPEC members are reacting as the threat to demand from the coronavirus pushes prices to a 6-month low. Delegates say OPEC is holding a meeting of technical representatives, the Joint Technical Committee, on Tuesday and Wednesday of this week to assess the virus's effect on markets. As OPEC and its partners are already in the midst of steep production cutbacks, many analysts are skeptical on how much more they're willing to do to boost prices. Susanna Palmer, Bloomberg, Daybreak, Europe.
Now, in earnings news this morning, Ryanair posted a profit for its winter low season. Europe's biggest budget airline was boosted by lucrative last-minute bookings over the Christmas and New Year's holidays. And Ryanair says it doesn't expect to get its first Boeing 737 MAX until September or October, so any cost savings won't be realised until next year.
And it is not just the British Prime Minister speaking today, as we're also expecting a speech from EU officials later. Basically, the UK may have left the EU, but the battle over what Brexit will mean is heating up. The Prime Minister, Boris Johnson, is using a speech in London today to threaten to walk away from talks. He doesn't want to sign up to the bloc's single market regulations or the rulings of its top court. He'll say that Britain will prosper with or without a deal.
OK, well, let's pick up that with Bloomberg's Maria Tadeo live on the line from Brussels, because today, Maria, we're also hearing from Michel Barnier later. Presumably, the EU officials are pretty much expecting this hard line from Boris Johnson. It's not a huge surprise.
No, it's not a huge surprise. And if you actually listen to everything that's come out from the European Union during the weekend, it really points that way. And Michel Barnier himself was doing the media rounds yesterday morning. And the speech today, we still don't have it, but it's really, I guess, it wouldn't be a surprise if we still hear this line that it's great that you want to get a trade deal with the European Union, but it needs to align closely to the standards, the regulations. The more you move away from that, the more difficult it is to get this done. Also, you have the time pressure that is built into this. We're talking about 11 months, but actually it's less than that if you think about the fact that the negotiation really only starts in March, and then it needs to be done way before the end of the year because they will have to ratify that deal. So that's on the content and the timeline going forward. And then secondly, again, you're going to see probably Michel Barnier say none of this is technically new. The UK actually agreed to this in the political declaration that was attached to the withdrawal agreement, which I'm sure you remember said, we agree that in the future we will have a broad relationship, but it will be fair. There will be fair competition. And then secondly, it's the European Court of Justice that can only assess and do arbitration if there's a dispute that comes out in the future.
How likely is it, Maria, that the UK manages to get a Canada-style deal with the EU?
Look, I think it's possible, Nira, and there's been this narrative that said, well, you know, there's never been a trade deal cut in such a short amount of time, but you also need to keep into account that the UK is actually not Canada. This was a country that was already in the European Union, and they're really actually operated by the rules set out by the European Union, but it does depend on two things. How much do you want to move away from the EU rules? And I think the narrative that is coming out of the UK now is that really the whole point of Brexit is that you're able to go at it alone, and the Prime Minister is not bluffing when it comes to that. And then secondly, you really need to lay out the priorities for the sectors that you want to tackle quickly, because this really affects every industry, and you're talking about major industries, and we know there's already sticking points when it comes to the fishing, for example. So all of this needs to be done quickly. I guess the bottom line is this just posturing at the start of a negotiation, and will this actually smoothen quickly with time? Well, that will depend. If you look at the market reaction, well, the pound is not really liking what it's hearing.
indeed, and many others the same. Maria, thanks. Maria Tadeo there live on the line from Brussels. Now let's get the latest from Leanne Gerrans with international and global news.
Roger, good morning. Let's start here in the UK. A man shot dead by armed police in Streatham in South London after stabbing two people is said to have been under active surveillance. Sudesh Aman had only just been released from prison for terrorism offences. Home Secretary Priti Patel says the government will announce further plans later today for fundamental changes on dealing with terrorism offences. Now to Ireland, where Prime Minister Leo Varadkar is facing an uphill battle to retain power. Bloomberg's Peter Flanagan says his Fine Gael party has slipped to third in the latest opinion poll, barely a week before the general election.
Varadkar's party trails main opposition Fianna Fáil and Sinn Féin by 3 percentage points, according to a survey published on Sunday. While the Prime Minister has put his role managing Brexit at the heart of his election campaign, voters seem more concerned with domestic issues, including a housing crisis and record levels of homelessness. In Dublin, Peter Flanagan, Bloomberg Daybreak Europe.
Thousands of Hong Kong medical professionals have begun a 5-day strike today. This comes after the government refused their demand to shut all entry points from China amid a deadly coronavirus outbreak on the mainland. Bloomberg's Karen Lee reports.
More than 1,000 medical workers have signed up to strike after talks between a local medical union and the city's hospital authority reportedly failed. The authorities said Monday that emergency services remain normal, and authorities had activated a major incident control center to monitor the situation. In Hong Kong, Karen Lee, Bloomberg Daybreak Europe.
And now to the US. Bernie Sanders is leading in the Iowa caucus, a key poll of potential presidential candidates among Democrats. Emerson College has his support at 28%, followed by Joe Biden on 21%. But a number of factors complicate the poll results. Caucus goers whose favorite candidate does not attain 15% of support can pick a fallback choice. And about 1/3 of voters say they could still change allegiance. Global news 24 hours a day, on air and on Quick Take by Bloomberg, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. I'm Leanne Gerrans. This is Bloomberg Naira.
Leanne, thank you so much. Coming up on Bloomberg Daybreak Europe, Thanos Papasava, CIO at ABP Invest, joins us next. This is Bloomberg.
Hi, everyone. Al Roker here. As a guy with his own catchphrase, I appreciate that after 75 years, Smokey's only said,
"Only you can prevent wildfires."
But I'm filling in because there's a lot more to report. Like when it's dry or windy. Be careful burning yard waste, because wildfires can even start in your neck of the woods. Go to SmokeyBear.com to learn more about wildfire prevention. Brought to you by the U.S. Forest Service, your state forester, and the Ad Council.
Are you looking for senior care for your mom or dad but don't know where to start? Hi, I'm Joan London with The Place for Mom. Nobody knows your parent or loved one better than you, and nobody knows senior living better than the experts at A Place for Mom. It's a free service, and we've helped thousands of families find the right place for their mom or dad. There's a place for answers, A Place for Mom. Call today.
Call A Place for Mom at 1-800-391-1755. That's 1-800-391-1755.
Message and data rates may apply. T&C and privacy terms can be found at babbel.com/terms. Please don't text and drive.
Have you wanted to speak a new language, but you thought it'd be too hard or take too much time? Then try Babbel for free by texting EXPLORE to 64,000. In just 15 minutes a day, you'll be on your way to speaking a new language in just a few weeks. And right now, you can try Babbel for free. Babbel starts out teaching you words and phrases by matching them with pictures. You won't believe how easy the interactive program is. Soon the sentences get a little bigger, and before you know it, you're having simulated conversations voiced by native speakers. And because Babbel is crafted by language experts and uses the spaced repetition method, in just 10 to 15 minutes a day, you'll be speaking the language of your choice with real confidence. With Babbel, you can speak a language. Just text EXPLORE to 64,000 and start your first lesson in the language of your choice for free. Download the Babbel app or text EXPLORE to 64,000 and try it for free. Text EXPLORE to 64,000.
Hey y'all, Jeff Foxworthy here. Now with whatever job you're searching for, you can find it on LinkedIn. First jobs, flexible jobs, keep me out the cold jobs, advertising jobs, accounting jobs, HR, PR, even hour in bed jobs, startup jobs, late start jobs, get home in the daylight jobs, banking jobs, building jobs, flexible working on a Friday jobs. even voiceover jobs, which is how I ended up recording this ad. Search millions of jobs on LinkedIn and find one meant for you.
Keys. Check. Phone. Check. 70s playlist downloaded. Check. Nice. There's one more thing you should check before you leave. Your travel. There's a new cycleway under construction between Kensington Olympia and Brentford Town Centre, so expect delays due to lane closures at the junction of Kew Bridge Road and Chiswick High Road. Plan ahead at tfl.gov.uk. To the Mayor of London and TfL, every journey matters.
So, this is how it is, Money. My daughter has flown the nest. I put up 10% as security for her new home. And when she keeps up with her repayments, I'm going to get it all back with interest in 5 years from Barclays. I will miss her. I'll even miss Dave, her cat. So come on, Money. How about we go buy a kitten? Barclays Family Springboard Mortgage. Make money work for you.
Your home may be repossessed if mortgage payments are missed. Deposit returned with interest after 5 years if no repayments missed. Subject to application, financial circumstances and borrowing history. T's and C's apply.
Good morning. This is your Southern service to London Victoria. Join in our onboard quiz. Here's our next clue. What sea sounds like a handheld party food but keeps you dry and protected from the rain? Not canapes, canopies.
At Southern Railway, we're investing over £7 million into making improvements for you, like canopies, cycle parking and new platform lighting across more of our stations. Find out more and book your tickets at southernrailway.com. Southern Railway, we're with you.
5 is in! What a run! Touchdown, Kansas City!
Congratulations to the Kansas City Chiefs on winning their first Super Bowl in 50 years and second in franchise history.
50, Watkins, 10, chase to the 5, into the end zone, touchdown! That may be all she wrote!
While the NFL's 100th season may be over, football never stops on TuneIn. Search NFL Podcast to stay current with all the off-season wheeling and dealing.
And get ready for the 2020 NFL Draft in April.
This is not a commercial. This is a reminder. With TuneIn Premium, you could be listening to more music commercial-free. Get over 45 commercial-free music stations. Visit tunein.com/premium to upgrade.
Want to hear about the latest and greatest things to listen to on TuneIn? For reminders of the biggest live sports games, debates, and breaking news stories, follow @TuneIn on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram to stay connected with the audio that matters to you.
In case you didn't know, TuneIn lets you listen to the same radio stations you pick up on your home or car radio, except you can hear them from anywhere. If you want to find a station from somewhere else in the world, navigate to the By Location section under Browse. Keep exploring with TuneIn.
You love TuneIn for live breaking news from CNN, MSNBC, Fox, CNBC, and more. But when you can't catch your favorite show as it airs, it might just be a click away as a podcast. Search your favorite news station to explore all the on-demand news shows on TuneIn.
The breaking news 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, the Bloomberg Business app, and on QuickTake by Bloomberg. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
From Bloomberg's European headquarters in London, I'm Sandra Kilhoff with this Bloomberg Radio Business Flash. Now, European equities are in the green despite a tumble in Chinese shares earlier as Shanghai came back online amid the coronavirus outbreak. The Stock 600 currently up 0.1%, the FTSE gaining 0.2%, the DAX up 0.3%. In stocks, I am keeping a close eye on Ryanair, the discount airline gaining almost 4% in Dublin after reporting a boost in sales. Otherwise, commodities are bearing the brunt of losses this morning. We're seeing iron ore down 4% in Singapore. China's equivalent did fall by its daily limit of 8% earlier. As so did we see copper, crude and palm oil sinking in Shanghai. At the same time, oil is under pressure following a Bloomberg report that Chinese oil demand may have plunged 20% on the coronavirus lockdown. WTI currently at $51 a barrel, while Brent is down 0.6% at $56 a barrel. In currencies, the yuan has fallen past that key 7 per dollar level. The onshore currently down more than 1% at 7.02. The yen also slightly weaker, down 0.2% at 108.6 against the greenback, while the Bloomberg dollar spot index is bid. Sterling down more than 0.5% now at 131, and the euro slightly weaker at 110. This is amid growing concerns over a no-deal Brexit. The UK and the EU both due to lay out their plans for trade negotiations today. Finally, in bond markets, the 10-year Treasury yield ticking higher, up 3 basis points at 1.54%. 10-year bund yields unchanged at negative 43. 10-year gilt yields holding at 52 basis points. That's a Bloomberg Business Flash. Now here's Leanne Garens with more.
what's going on around the world.
Sandra, thank you. Australian citizens trapped by coronavirus outbreak in China are being evacuated to an immigration detention centre. Evacuees from Wuhan are on their way to Australia's Christmas Island, where they'll be in quarantine for 2 weeks. Canberra said 243 citizens and permanent residents, including 89 children, are on board. President Trump's impeachment trial is now drawing to a close. Republican senators are preparing to acquit the president. Senator Lamar Alexander is supporting the move to dismiss the charges. That's despite being among the few Republicans saying that withholding US aid to Ukraine was wrong. But he also says it should be up to voters to decide President Trump's fate. And staying with President Trump, staying in the US, the Kansas City Chiefs have defeated the San Francisco 49ers to win the 54th Super Bowl. It was Kansas City's first victory in 50 years. Quarterback Patrick Mahomes was named the game's most valuable player, according to one advertising executive. The win may help him rake in another $7 million a year in endorsements. Global news 24 hours a day, on air and on Quick Take by Bloomberg, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. I'm Leanne Gerrand. This is Bloomberg Naira.
Leanne, thank you so much. Let's get back to the markets and to our guest for this hour, Thanos Papasava, CIO at ABP Invest, with us in the London studio. Great to have you with us, Thanos. Happy Monday. Terrible Monday for Chinese assets, particularly equities, or mainly equities, and the yuan. Biggest drop since 2015 for Chinese equities. You start to wonder when the state-backed funds, the national team, might start to come in and support the market. We already got announcements of some support from authorities in terms of liquidity injections. Would you want to be stepping in now to buy Chinese equities?
Well, we have been positive on the Chinese equities. Our view had been that the news headlines, which were basically saying, which came out a couple of weeks ago, saying the slowest growth rate in 29 years. We thought this is not fair. If we compare the economy of China, it was $1 trillion back in 1990 and over $14 trillion now. And we do have faith in the policymakers. We've already seen quite a significant action in terms of the reduction of rates and provision of liquidity. And we're not overtly concerned about the weakness of the Chinese renminbi. I think that under this phase one agreement with the US, the Chinese would not want to see the renminbi weaken significantly, as it would adversely impact the trade relations and negotiations. So I would say in this very difficult environment, is a black swan event, we are cautious but positively, sort of gradually optimistic rather than concerning and negative.
So do you think the PBOC has done enough? Because they've jumped in, they've pushed hard. Is it enough? Is it going to do the trick?
I'm not sure if it's enough, because we will see how this sort of extends and if it does accelerate. My key point is that they will do whatever is enough. And if this is not enough, they will take further action to ensure that the available liquidity and the cuts are in place. They're going to move the necessary levers to ensure that the economy does not fall into a sort of significant correction.
Yeah. Now, obviously, it's always difficult to talk about opportunities when you're talking about an event with a human cost, such as the coronavirus, Thanos. So we're sensitive to that. But at the same time, a lot of investors starting to look for where they can pick up these opportunities in these moments of weakness. Is China the best place for that, or are there other places, either in emerging markets, or dare I say, even the US indices? The S&P 500 erased its 2020 gains on Friday, but futures pointing higher today.
Yeah. Well, I always think that diversification is the best strategy, because in general, diversification plays best, but especially in times when we have such big uncertainties, it will be very small probability with quite a significant impact. So it is always good to be diversified across asset classes, across regions, but from a valuation point of view, Chinese, but including Korea, for example, are more attractive from a valuation point than US, similar to the DAX. So our preference would be sort of Germany and China to the US from a valuation perspective, looking sort of medium term rather than the shorter term volatility which we could continue to see.
But in the wider sphere, I mean, take EM more generally, the commodities meltdown, which we've kind of seen as a result of this, and the demand pulling away. How much of a concern is that for anyone who's invested in the EM sphere?
It is, and I think that we've seen a correction both in oil and, for example, in copper. Our view on oil from March of last year has been a neutral outlook. We felt that the fair value was between 50 on WTI crude, between 50 and 60, and we've maintained that view. Why? Because we feel that Putin, so sort of Saudi, Russia, and the US benefit from this broadly stable range. And we continue to believe that should, for example, we see further decline in terms of the demand from China, they will impact the supplies in order to ensure that prices remain within that sort of 50 to 60 range. Not below 50, it adversely impacts Russia and Saudi. Not above 60, it adversely impacts the US economy ahead of the November elections.
Yeah, I mean, Citigroup is saying that Brent could go sub $50 a barrel. But when we look at the commodity spectrum, we've really seen commodities punished, not just in oil, but iron ore being hit as well, copper in Shanghai. If we continue to see a trend like that, and you can say whether you think it will continue, what does that do to any bets of on inflation? I do remember that you were quite bullish on inflation picking up at some point in the year, Thanos.
That's right, because my outlook had been that the policymakers in China and the trade, with that coming off, and the US and Trump continue to ensure that the US economy stays on a front footing, we'll see some positive economic growth and potentially the Fed being behind the curve. Now, clearly this event will see whether this strategy continues to pan out. I'm not negating that yet for the time being. So I would be, again, similar to my comments earlier in terms of China, I have a sort of a slightly optimistic look on what we're seeing. My concern is the shift since the previous crises in terms of funds moving away from an active to a passive environment, because here we're very much impacted in terms of the broader sentiment of investments rather than active managers taking a view on the positions.
Now, Thanos, you mentioned earlier on concerns about the S&P, and the truth is it's not just, obviously, the virus that's out there as an issue. I think in your notes it's interesting, you say it's more the threat, for example, of the Iowa and New Hampshire decisions in terms of getting candidates with an eye to the election you've already mentioned. I mean, how much of it is, for example, at the moment, Bernie Sanders leading Biden in the Iowa caucus?
It was in our last monthly insight, we sort of raised the concern of an S&P correction. Obviously not being aware of the developments with the virus, but our concern was that markets had been a bit complacent about the potential win of Bernie Sanders, and not that he has, in my view, a high probability of winning in November, but there is a probability of him winning, and the markets were not appropriately positioned or priced that in. So in our view, we were potentially calling for a weakness in the S&P on the back of New Hampshire, Iowa, not necessarily South Carolina, and of course Super Tuesday in March.
What does coronavirus, added to all the other risks that we were thinking about at the start of 2020, do to dollar dynamics, Thanos?
In times of key global uncertainty, if this is a crisis, then we would expect safe havens such as the dollar, the yen, the Swiss franc, gold to rally. If we look at dollar yen, the dollar hasn't really, the yen hasn't really rallied as much. No. It's a couple of points, but still within the sort of 108 handle. So the markets doesn't seem to suggest that this is a significant crisis. And the reason why the Chinese markets moved in the way they did today is because they have been closed for the last week. So the dollar under that scenario should strengthen, but we're not calling for that. As you know, we're still sort of negative dollar versus EM and neutral versus the euro.
All right, Thanos, thank you so much for being with us. Thanos Papasavas, their CIO at ABP Invest, joining us in our London studio. And coming up in the next hour of Daybreak Europe, Anna Edwards and Matt Miller will be here speaking to Simon Harvey, FX market analyst at Monex Europe, again talking about the ways in which currencies are moving with regard to what's going on in the Far East.
Yeah, and as we sort of touched on with our guest there, currencies haven't really moved as much compared to other asset classes in the wake of the coronavirus. Of course, we did see the yuan weaken through 7 today, but the equity markets borne the brunt of it, particularly Chinese equities, the Stock 600 up 0.2%.
Witham offers private equity expertise to address the advisor.
Whatever job you're searching for, you can find it on LinkedIn. First jobs, flexible jobs. Keep me out the cold jobs. Advertising jobs, accounting jobs, HR, PR, even ER jobs. East London jobs, West London jobs, extra hour in bed jobs. Startup jobs, late start jobs, get home in the daylight jobs. Banking jobs, building jobs, flexible working on a Friday jobs. Or even voiceover jobs, which is how I ended up recording this ad. Search millions of jobs on LinkedIn and find one meant for you.
Keys. Check. Phone. Check. 70s playlist downloaded? Check. Nice. There's one more thing you should check before you leave. Your travel. There's a new cycleway under construction between Kensington Olympia and Brentford Town Centre, so expect delays due to lane closures at the junction of Kew Bridge Road and Chiswick Road. Plan ahead at tfl.gov.uk. To the Mayor of London and TfL, every journey matters.
Good morning, this is your Southern service to London, Victoria. Join in our onboard quiz. Here's our next clue. What C sounds like a handheld party food but keeps you dry and protected from the rain? Not canapes, canopies.
At Southern Railway, we're investing over £7 million into making improvements for you, like canopies, cycle parking and new platform lighting across more of our stations. Find out more and book your tickets at southernrailway.com. Southern Railway, we're with you.
Bloomberg.com, on the Bloomberg Business app, and on Quick Take by Bloomberg. This is Bloomberg Radio.
This is Bloomberg Daybreak Europe.
We're now seeing for the first time is this facade of absolute unity beginning to break down in the EU.
We expect that there will be some type of slowdown recession beyond 2019.
The European banking system, although recovering, hasn't recovered, and there are areas of fragility. We've seen this before.
Trade talks that lead nowhere, and then tariffs. We just swing from one to the other, and markets get caught in the middle.
Bloomberg Daybreak Europe with Anna Edwards and Matt Miller on Bloomberg Radio.
Good morning from I'm Anna Edwards.
And from the Bloomberg Bureau in Berlin, I'm Matt Miller. You're listening to Daybreak Europe on London DAB Digital Radio.
Yes, you are, and happy Monday, everybody. Not such a happy Monday on Chinese equity markets. We certainly had heavy selling coming through across China. That, of course, because markets reopening for the first time since the Lunar New Year holiday. The Shanghai Composite down by 7.7% by the close. Interesting to see the Australian market and some other markets that were open last week taking another leg down today. So the ASX 200 down by 1.3%. The European story has been a little bit more robust. So the Stoxx 600 up by 0.2%. US futures continue to point fairly robustly to the upside, taking solace from some of the measures being taken by the PBOC, the central bank in China. We're getting some data through on Euro area manufacturing, adding to our knowledge of just where we are on the manufacturing story globally. We get US ISM later, which is another measure of the manufacturing sector stateside. And the Euro area number for January is coming at 47.9. The preliminary was 47.8. So it's just a touch above that estimate. But it's still below 50, suggesting we are still in contraction territory. So even before we see any real robust impact from the coronavirus on supply chains, on global growth, on Chinese growth, certainly, even before we see that come through in the data, we have a sort of underwhelming picture being painted by global manufacturing once again as we continue to look for a bottom in that global manufacturing story. So that's where we are on some equity markets then. The Stoxx 600, as I said, up by 0.2%.
They want enough policy stimulus there to allow steady growth, but then they also want to leave enough bullets in the chamber, as it were, policy room for the future. So to see whether they got the policy right or not, the next couple of weeks is likely to be rather crucial with regards to this, and they've got to decide whether these economic shocks will be temporary or extend over the midterm. So that's where we are here. The thing is, it's a demand issue, and many economists are saying, well, does this really help stimulate demand fundamentally, guys?
So we've got so that's the latest on the virus itself and the stimulus measures being taken by the PBOC. What about the data that we got from Hong Kong this morning, backward looking as it is? We're looking at images of Carrie Lam speaking this morning. Clearly she's going to give us an update on what's going on with the coronavirus and measures being taken in Hong Kong. But this is an economy that has been battered by trade tensions, then by protest activity, and now by this.
Absolutely. As you say, it was a one whammy, then it was a double whammy. Now we've got a triple whammy here as well. Carrie Lam actually just at the moment speaking live and updating everybody on the current situation in the territory against this backdrop of GDP. As you said, it is backward looking, so it doesn't take into account the virus and the effects that's been happening. GDP growth is shrinking by 0.4% in the fourth quarter from the previous one. It's better than expected, however, because the economists we've been talking to on average thought that the economy would have contracted by about 1.5%. Overall, better than anticipated, 1.2% decline for the whole year when we were looking at a 1.4% fallback. All of this against also mainland China suffering 2/3 of that economy at the moment, effectively in shutdown for the rest of this week. It is one which is seeing some 14 provinces closed in effect, and they are some of the heartlands, economic heartlands of the country, and represent over 75% of the country's exports. So there you go. I mean, could it be worse than when we had SARS in 2003, when we saw 2 percentage points shaved off GDP growth in the country? Some economists suggesting it could well be worse than that, but maybe they're just doomsayers. But who knows? We're going to have to find out about that. So at the moment, we are just seeing this all trickle in this data, and we're going to be also just having a look at what's going on with tourism, transportation, hotels, catering, and that sort of thing at the moment, because they're the sectors of the economy which are probably having the biggest difficulties, guys.
All right, it'll be interesting to see also because Carrie Lam right now is saying she's going to announce further measures today, what the Hong Kong government still wants to do about this. Rishad Salamat from Bloomberg's, normally Bloomberg's Hong Kong office. Now he is in the new version of a Hong Kong office, which is his home. Thanks, Rish.
Yeah, we'll keep bringing you these lines from Carrie Lam. She says that Hong Kong is to reduce the flow of people at checkpoints. So it doesn't sound like a closing of the border, as some in the medical profession in Hong Kong have been calling for, but reducing the flow of people. Let's get more on what this all means for the markets. Let's bring in Simon Harvey, FX market analyst at Monex Europe, who's with us here in studio. Simon, we saw the yuan falling through the crucial 7 to the dollar level this morning. I guess it wasn't a surprise that we saw onshore catching up with offshore. These two measures of the Chinese currency had been out of sync, and now they're back in sync. How much weaker does the Chinese currency get?
I think what's most interesting about all of this is that if we didn't see the US-China trade war last year, would we even be discussing the onshore market breaking 7? I mean, Donald Trump puts out this nice box of, you can't be a currency manipulator, you can't keep manipulating the global economy by devaluing your currency. But if it wasn't for the US-China trade war, we would never seen the tolerance by officials of breaking the 7 level. So it's kind of like come back round to bite him a bit. Onshore markets are catching up with offshore markets, but again, offshore markets wouldn't have even broken the 7 level if there wasn't precedent for it. Now, we've seen that the fixing is actually higher today than back in August of last year, where PBOC or Chinese officials actually placed it in order for it to allow it to break 7 on the US Treasury report. So we're seeing this kind of tolerance by Chinese officials to allow the currency to take a greater weighting into this counter-cyclical regime.
Why haven't we seen, Simon, a lot more strength, for example, in the Japanese yen, a lot more strength in the Swiss franc? Why don't we see this as, equities come down and people pile into high yield, investment grade and government debt? Why don't we see people going into these safe haven currencies?
We kind of saw it all baked in last week. We were only seeing equity markets flash red today because they've been closed for the lunar holiday. I mean, look elsewhere. FX markets, they're much more resilient to these kind of micro factors. It's easier to look at the footstep count going past in China into Chinese retail kind of equities. It's easier to gauge how much oil demand has slumped. It's not easy to gauge what containment means for China's macroeconomy. And this is kind of the beast that FX markets have been battling so far. Yes, we have some sort of gauge of sentiment on the ground with today's onshore markets opening up. But still, we've got no data. The PMIs, they only went up to the second week of January. They don't really show the impact of the contagion. And at the same time, they're always tainted by the lunar year. We don't get any more data till the end of February. And again, they're more PMIs, which aren't the best estimate. We don't really get any data until we go into March. So, for FX markets, it's difficult to price.
It's difficult to price, but we do get some clues, don't we? I mean, we've got this report out this morning that suggests that Chinese oil demand has dropped 20% as a result of the coronavirus and the shutdowns to the economy that have been instigated, Simon. What impact should we look for then from those oil prices or oil demand dropping? How is that going to impact on your world, your FX world?
I mean, it impacts the commodity-linked currencies. It doesn't necessarily impact what our base case is for global growth, for Chinese growth, so far. We have to wait and see. I mean, we've reevaluated our dollar call. We've reevaluated our other FX, our other currencies that are linked to commodities heavily, especially the open market economies. You then start to talk about what's the impact really, the more structural impact on China's economy, and we don't know. We need to see how much of this actual activity is displaced, or whether it's just a temporary. Can this be brought back? We saw in SARS that most of it was industrial production. They brought it back in after, you can work overtime, you can increase, you can run down inventories on oil, you can do all these things. But now with, the Chinese economy is in a much different place to where it was in 2003. It was sixth in the global economy rankings. It's now second. We talk about all these statistics, and it's now more based upon consumption. Now, if I wasn't traveling on holiday during January because I wasn't allowed to by authorities, can I now go and take a holiday as soon as my factory reopens? Most probably not. So all of this is about whether the activity is displaced for good or whether it's temporary and we can bring it back.
Yeah, absolutely. Good points there. Simon, thanks so much for joining us today on television and on radio. Simon Harvey from Monex. I want to get over to Leanne Gerrans now with your global news headlines. Leanne?
Matt, good morning. The UK may have left the EU, but the battle over Brexit doesn't look like it's going away anytime soon. Boris Johnson is set to deliver a tough message to Brussels as talks begin to determine the UK's future trading relationship with the EU. Britain is pushing for a Canada-style arrangement, as Bloomberg's Sebastian Salek reports.
The UK side is determined to begin these talks holding tight to the key promises of Brexit, not signing up to EU single market rules or accepting the jurisdiction of the European Court. The Prime Minister says the UK will prosper even without a deal, and those words have revived fears that Britain could be in a no-deal situation this time next year. The EU chief Brexit negotiator, Michel Barnier, is due to set out his planned negotiating position in Brussels shortly after the Prime Minister's speech. These are opening positions, but everyone understands that it will be a difficult process on a tight timetable. In London, I'm Sebastian Salek, Bloomberg Daybreak Europe.
Staying in the UK, the man shot dead by armed police in Streatham in South London on Sunday after stabbing two people is said to have been under active surveillance. Sujesh Mani had only just been released from prison for terrorism offences. Home Secretary Priti Patel says the government will announce further plans later for fundamental changes on dealing with offences. This is Bloomberg.
Business is constantly evolving. Is your financial printer evolving to keep ahead of the curve? At Command Financial, we are redefining financial printing by providing industry-leading expertise, leveraging technology, and honing processes and best practices. Every day, Command helps SEC registrants, as well as members of their working groups, including securities attorneys and investment bankers, prepare, file, and disseminate regulatory and disclosure documents, such as registration statements, M&A documents, and mutual fund prospectuses and reports. Command provides a full range of services to help you effectively complete your deal, meet your disclosure requirements, and achieve your shareholder communications objectives. Visit our website at commandfinancial.com and learn how we're evolving, not only with the times, but also with your business requirements. Command Financial, redefining financial printing.
In the world of financial advice, speed, clarity, and foresight aren't just nice to have, they're required to survive. Adipar provides advisors the real-time portfolio reporting and insights required to realize the goals and personal potential for their clients. Trusted by thousands of wealth advisors, from family offices, RIAs, and large financial institutions, Adipar helps you make better, more informed investment decisions. To learn more, visit us at addepar.com.
Open calendar. What's my schedule looking like?
Next Thursday, you will be caught in an emergency flash flood between Park and First Street.
What? No, that doesn't work. I'm busy then. Decline. Decline.
Floods don't exactly work around your schedule. Disasters don't plan ahead. But you can. It starts with talking to your loved ones about making an emergency plan. So don't wait. Communicate. Get started today at ready.gov/plan. Brought to you by FEMA and the Ad Council.
Influential conversations from Bloomberg Television. Here's Youssef Kamel El-Din.
Double Line CEO Jeffrey Gundlach says he now sees a 90% chance for a Fed rate cut this year. Christine Todd, head of fixed income for the U.S. at Amundi Asset Management, is with us. The Fed is already accommodative. We got 75 bips of reductions in 2019. It's not really a lot more the Fed can do here.
If you look at the dots, the Fed is anticipating actually a hike in 2021 and the terminal rate to be about 2.5%. The market is pricing in 25 basis point cut in the end of this year, moved up from December to November based on the coronavirus, and another 25 basis point cut the following year. Based on our bullishness of the consumer, small business sector, accommodative Fed, presidential policy, which importantly instituted a major tax cut and has decreased the cost of regulation to businesses from about $120 billion to almost zero. And this is all very stimulative. And we see, signs of inflation percolating. We don't see that the Phillips curve is dead at all. So we would disagree with Gundlach, and we would be more steady and take a longer-term view in terms of the economic strength and stability.
Hear more interviews like this one on Bloomberg Television, streaming live on Bloomberg.com and on the Bloomberg mobile app, or check your local cable listings.
Markets, headlines and breaking news 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, the Bloomberg Business app, and on QuickTake by Bloomberg. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
From Bloomberg's European headquarters here in London, I'm Caroline Hepker with this Bloomberg Radio Business Flash. So European equity markets actually steady. We're gaining by 0.25% on the Euro Stoxx 600. US futures are also higher for all three main benchmark indices. This despite the rout that we saw in China. The CSI 300 stock index closing down almost 8% lower than most since 2015 as the onshore financial markets opened up for the first time since January the 23rd. And it was a real day of reckoning in terms of the coronavirus. Having said that, Chinese officials urging investors to evaluate the impact of the disease objectively. The PBOC injecting cash into the financial system on Monday. The yuan, though, did weaken past a key level against the dollar, the 7 level. So we currently trade on the onshore at 7.0197. Sterling, though, elsewhere is also dipping. Investors reacting to a UK report about the Prime Minister. The potential for a no-deal Brexit again seems to be looming, or at least a possibility at the end of the year. In terms of the bond markets, looking there, US benchmark yields, which have dipped so much, well, we trade at 1.54%. We're actually up by 3 basis points this morning, and German yields at negative 42 basis points, also heading high in terms of yields, up nearly a basis point. The other big story, though, has been in the commodity markets, a big decline in oil demand, according to people familiar with the matter, from China, and that could have a significant impact. That is a Bloomberg Business Flash. Now here's Leanne Gerrans with more on what's going on around the world. Good morning.
Good morning, Caroline. Syrian government forces have killed 4 Turkish soldiers and wounded 9 others. This is the deadliest direct clash between the neighbours in the northwestern province of Idlib that could fuel tensions. Turkey's army returned fire after sustaining casualties as a result of intense shelling by troops loyal to Bashar al-Assad. French President Emmanuel Macron is visiting Poland later today. This is in an effort to reset frosty relations at a time when Britain's departure from the European Union is reshaping political alliances in the 27-member bloc. The two countries have World War I drama 1917 was the biggest winner at last night's BAFTAs. It took home 7 prizes, including Best Picture and Best Director. Other winners included Joker, The Irishman, and Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. But the awards ceremony was overshadowed by criticism of the lack of diversity among nominees. Global news 24 hours a day, on air and on QuickTake by Bloomberg. Powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. I'm Leanne Gerrans. This is Bloomberg.
Bloomberg Opinion, informed perspectives, and expert data-driven commentary on breaking news.
It's 9:20 in the city of London. Time to check in with Bloomberg Opinion. We are joined here in Berlin by opinion columnist Andreas Kluth, who's writing about Germany's need for a bigger, stronger army, or frankly, any kind of army at all. Andreas, you point out the Germans have 20,000 empty positions to fill.
That's right. That's just one of their problems. Other of their problems include they have I think 2 and 3 and 4 of their Puma tanks are out of order, and a lot of helicopters don't fly, a lot of submarines. They don't have backpacks, helmets.
I think they only have one working sub.
That's possible. What they're doing with it is another question. So they really, this reflects a much longer, decades-long cultural animosity towards all things military in Germany.
Yes, and you write, good morning to you, Andreas, you write in your piece, and this is interesting for those of us outside Germany to get a handle of the cultural dimension here. You say that modern Germans go by the mantra that Germans don't shoot, they trade, and that's dictated that young people don't want to go into the army, and that the army doesn't command much of a position of respect in sort of popular culture. From an economic perspective, does Berlin have any intention of meeting that 2% of GDP target, do you think?
No, that's not according to me, but to the auditor appointed by the German parliament to do this. He said this. Everyone else is aware of this, and that's why there's so much tension between Germany and the U.S., but also Poland and all the other NATO allies. Everyone can see it in the current and next budget, and then read between the tea leaves for the subsequent budgets leading up to 2024 that they have no intention of getting, that they've stated 1.5% of GDP as a goal. And the scuttlebutt is that they won't even meet that, and the NATO goal is 2%.
I wonder what could change this, because it's understandable that the German people, after starting and losing 2 world wars, are hesitant to go back to building any kind of significant military force. At the same time, now that we have Donald Trump running the U.S., they can no longer count on help from the world's biggest superpower. And indeed, the next time Russia decides to take over some other country, maybe nobody will do anything about it. Is that what needs to happen?
Yeah, I think you just pointed at the 2 big changes in post-war German thinking since this consensus took hold. One, 2014, when Russia invaded Crimea, started being aggressive in Ukraine, and reminded everyone that that Russia is still dangerous. 2 years later, 2016, Trump is in and keeps reminding its allies that his American support might be conditional. And the whole point of the NATO alliance is that it's unconditional support to deter aggressors. And that's caused hand-wringing and fear here, but it hasn't yet, that's the crucial point, led to a sea change in Germany politically, and that's especially on the left. And that's what I'm saying. The only person who can use her lame duck status to make this clear is Merkel. She's on the way out anyway.
And it's not just Germany that's wrestling with this. Just briefly, Andreas, I mean, an EU army, we hear a lot of talk about this. How close to reality is that?
Completely a pipe dream, as I said in another earlier column, but that's a sort of oratorical flourish that a lot of European politics like to resort to. It sounds good. What they have is a defense market being developed. That's very European. You know how the procurement, how to buy this gear, this kit. But there's no. I mean, there are some integrated units, there's experiments, but there is no chance of a genuine European army governed and commanded by European commanders.
I mean, Germany still flies the Tornadoes, by the way, which don't work technologically with Eurofighters. So they would have a difficult time joining that army, and they're the richest country in the whole bloc. Andreas, thanks so much for joining us. Andreas Kluth here writing about Germany's need for a bigger, stronger army. You can check out his work and the work of his colleagues by typing OPIN GO. This is Bloomberg.
With the Bloomberg Business of Sports Report, I'm Michael Barr. Tokyo Olympic organizers are trying to shoot down rumors that this year's 2020 Games might be canceled or postponed because of the spread of a new virus. Japan has so far reported no deaths from the coronavirus that has killed hundreds of people in China. The Olympics open on July 24th. A footnote about the site of Super Bowl 54, Hard Rock Stadium in Miami. They ditched all of its disposable plastic cups for Sunday's game for 50,000 cups made from aluminum, which is easier to recycle. However, aluminum cups are more expensive than its plastic counterparts. Stadium concessionaire Centerplate, Bud Light, and Ball were involved. Centerplate and the Miami Dolphins have invested $500,000 in their push to rid Hard Rock Stadium of single-use plastic. And that is a Bloomberg Business of Sports Report. I'm Michael Barr, brought to you by Grainger, America's trusted source for industrial and safety supplies. Visit Grainger.com.
Are you interested in a challenging and exciting career? One where you can be part of solving complex challenges across industries and geographies? Bloomberg's ever-expanding technology, data, news, and media services foster innovation, empower clients, and offer nearly limitless opportunities for career growth. Visit Bloomberg.com/careers today to view our current job opportunities. Bloomberg LP is an equal opportunity employer. The address once again is Bloomberg.com/careers.
GEP, AI-powered cloud-native digital transformation. Hundreds of Fortune 500 and Global 2000 companies work with GEP to transform their procurement and supply chain operations. Why? GEP's unified digital platforms, smart, intuitive software that business users love, drive up adoption, user satisfaction, and productivity. GEP helps CIOs drive real digital transformation and achieve amazing results. GEP, helping the world's best companies do better.
Imagine. If you're a growing business, be ready when your big moment arrives. One day, you might need to take an online payment at 4 a.m. for a unicorn cake. Or you might need to take lots of payments due to a surge in demand for duck egg blue paint this spring. Be ready with Barclaycard Business. Sign up before the 3rd of April and get 50% off e-commerce rental or card machine rental for 12 months. Search Barclaycard Business and find offers designed for growing businesses. Barclaycard, we take every payment seriously. Subject to application, financial circumstances and borrowing history. T's and C's, exclusions and contract apply. New UK customers only.
You're listening to the sound of a Halifax customer who used to worry she wasn't saving enough, but is now saving the change every time she runs out of milk. Switch on Save the Change, and when you use your Halifax Visa debit card, we'll round up to the nearest pound and put the difference into your chosen Halifax savings accounts.
It's already chilly in London, and you know that dodgy boiler is on its last legs. So if the thought of no heating makes you break out in a cold sweat, talk to British Gas. You can spread the cost of a new boiler interest-free over 2 years and get £200 off when you get a quote by the 29th of February, or £400 off for existing home care customers. British Gas, here to solve. Search British Gas new boiler. Conditions apply.
Where are we?
The New Forest.
But I thought we only had the Mini Countryman booked for a test drive. We can't stay here.
We're not going to.
This isn't exactly what I meant.
Relax. With Mini's new 48-hour test drive, you can use the Countryman for exactly what it's built for. Exploring. Plus, it's an SUV, the largest Mini in the range, so you can pack loads more in.
Great. Where next?
Well, you know how you've always wanted to try kayaking?
The Mini Countryman 48-hour test drive. Visit mini.co.uk to book yours. Mini. Who's in? Test drive subject to status and availability. Terms and conditions apply. Participating Mini retailers only.
The Grand DFS sale featuring Wallace.
Hello?
And Gromit.
Well, say hello, lad.
Every sofa is made to order.
By a speedy Sofa-matic machine?
By hand.
Oh, suit yourself.
So you can have your sofa exactly how you want it.
Made of cheese?
Not that exactly.
Oh, probably a good thing, eh, Gromit? It'd be gone in a jiffy.
The Grand DFS sale is now on.
How about a cushion made of cheese? Or a footstool?
Broadcasting live to London on DAB digital radio, to New York, Bloomberg 1130, to Washington DC, Bloomberg 99.1, to Boston, Bloomberg 106.1, to San Francisco, Bloomberg 960, and around the globe, the Bloomberg Business app and BloombergRadio.com. This is Bloomberg Daybreak Europe.
Good morning from the Berlin Bureau. I'm Matt Miller.
And I'm Anna Edwards. You're listening to Bloomberg Daybreak Europe. It's just gone at 9:30 here in London, 10:30 if you're in Paris or Berlin, where Matt finds himself. And Matt, European equity markets put in a strong start to the session, actually just managing to hold their heads above water as US futures point higher.
Yeah, that's right. We have seen a little bit of a fluctuation in European equity index levels today. We were up, then we were down, now we're back up, and we have been pretty solidly for the past 30 minutes or so. The FTSE gaining about 30 points right now, 73.13. The DAX up about 40 to 13,022. So we're looking at 0.25% to 1/3% gains across European equity indexes. U.S. equity index futures have been solidly up all morning, and we're looking at 0.5% gains for the NASDAQ futures and a little bit less for Dow and S&P futures. Tech stocks have been the big winners here in Europe, and it looks like they'll be the bigger winners over in the U.S. as well. In terms of what we see on other risk indicators, you see the 10-year yield rising, but it's at a very low level. So it is coming back up, but it's still at 1.5357%. You see the dollar gaining strength against the yen. You can now buy 108.54 yen for your dollar. And you can see the price of gold coming back down. So right now, 1577.29 a troy ounce. All of the risk indicators seem to point to a risk-on session across Europe and the U.S. today. By the way, oil is trading at $56.28, and that is Brent crude? It sounds like a NYMEX quote, but actually Brent, 56.30 now, and NYMEX WTI is 51.55.
Matt, let's talk more about the Chinese coronavirus, because Chinese markets plunged as they returned from the Lunar New Year holiday to the widening coronavirus crisis. That's as the death toll rose to 360, with more than 17,000 confirmed cases in China. For more, let's go live to Hong Kong, where Bloomberg's Eric Lam is standing by. And Eric, we're just seeing a few lines coming through from the WHO saying that highlighting really how the epicenter of this is still in China, saying that the spread of coronavirus outside China is slow and the fight should be at the source in China. Bring us up to date on what that fight looks like from the Chinese.
Well, for Chinese markets today, certainly it was a very busy day back. We, as you said, with some of those numbers, it was actually the first opportunity for many investors in the region to react for the first time, given that Chinese markets had been closed since January 23rd. So there was really a lot of pent-up selling going on, and not even all of that selling made it through the books today. So we might see continued selling in the days to come, because not everybody got all their sell orders out today. We had almost 4,000 stocks down overall. More than 3,000 stocks were down the limit, which is 10% in China. We had traders who some traders basically said they saw the numbers and they got their fishing pole and took off for the day because there's nothing else to do.
What kind of damage then do we expect going forward? I mean, if they couldn't get their sell orders in and they couldn't buy anything, so they just, went fishing, gone fishing, as you say, are they going to sell tomorrow?
Yeah, it's entirely possible that we will see continued weakness here. Now, the Chinese regulator and the Chinese government is doing what it can to help support financial markets. They introduced they lowered the rates for lending for banks and lowered the costs of that. So they're trying to support the market. And also there is talk about the regulator telling some proprietary traders, for instance, that they can't be net sellers to end the period. So the Chinese government and Chinese regulators are doing what they can, but right now the momentum of selling still looks to be continued to be on the downside.
And Eric, we continue to see this, we see this dominating market conversation and indeed life in Hong Kong. You're in Hong Kong. For people outside trying to assess in the territory how much it is impacting on day-to-day life and the economy. We had some figures on the economy. They're pretty backward looking, but you could take us through those, but also paint a picture of daily life and how interrupted it has been.
Sure, absolutely. First off, the numbers you're talking about, we just got fourth quarter GDP growth numbers for Hong Kong, and they confirm what we've been expecting for a while now, and what the government has been forecasting for a while now as well, which is an annual contraction for the Hong Kong economy. That's minus 1.2%, which is the first contraction on an annual basis going back a decade. Now, as you mentioned, these numbers are backwards looking. I would say that the fourth quarter numbers came in slightly better than what economists were forecasting, but I got a quick comment from an economist reacting to the numbers just earlier, and he notes that any kind of green shoots that we might see from this is going to be fairly short-lived, because the coronavirus issue, which is still developing, obviously, is going to have a negative impact on the first quarter numbers as well. When you talk about the daily life in Hong Kong, definitely walking out on the street, you're seeing people wearing face masks. You try to go to any drugstores or pharmacies, you're not going to be able to buy face masks these days. You can't get alcohol, the antibacterial hand cleaner, things like that. All of those things are sold out. You're pretty much forced to buy those things online or try to source it some other way, because you're just not getting it in the stores. And then when you take a look at shopping malls or on the streets, you're not seeing as much foot traffic, you're not seeing as much business. And these parts of the economy had already taken a pretty strong hit over the last 7 months from the protests. And certainly the virus situation is really exacerbating things and making things worse.
All right.
Eric, thanks so much. Thanks for the update. In Hong Kong for Bloomberg, Eric Lam.
Let's get over to Leanne Gerrans now with your global news headlines. Leanne?
Good morning, Matt. The UK may have left the EU, but the battle over Brexit doesn't look like it's going away anytime soon. Prime Minister Boris Johnson is using a speech in London today to threaten to walk away from talks. He doesn't want to sign up to the bloc's single market regulations or the rulings of its top court. He'll say Britain will prosper with or without a deal. Staying in the UK, the man shot dead by armed police in Streatham in South London on Sunday after stabbing two people is said to have been under active surveillance. Sudesh Aman had only just been released from prison for terrorism offences. Home Secretary Priti Patel says the government will announce further plans later for fundamental changes on dealing with terrorism offences.
Those measures will build upon ending the early release of counter-terrorism offenders. It's right that these individuals are kept behind bars, and we need to stop their early release from prison.
And now to the US, and Iowa candidate Bernie Sanders is leading in a key poll of Democrats. Emerson College has his support at 28%, followed by Joe Biden on 21%. But a number of factors complicate the poll results. Caucus goers whose favorite candidate doesn't attain 15% of support can pick a fallback choice. And about 1/3 of voters say they could still change their allegiance. And protests against India's controversial citizenship law are growing again ahead of local elections in New Delhi. Bloomberg's Archana Chowdhury reports. Apologies, we don't seem to have that sound for you at the moment. We'll bring that later. Global news 24 hours a day, on air and on Quick Take by Bloomberg. Powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. I'm Leanne Gerrans. This is Bloomberg. Anna.
Thanks very much, Leanne. Now with your morning sports news, here's Richard Newman.
England head coach Eddie Jones says his side forgot how to play rugby in the first half of their Six Nations defeat to France. The World Cup runners-up started their campaign with a 24-17 loss in Paris. 2 tries from Johnny May and an Owen Farrell penalty ensured they picked up a losing bonus point. The Kansas City Chiefs produced a brilliant comeback to win American football's Super Bowl, their first in 50 years, with his team 10 points down to San Francisco 49ers going into the final quarter. Chiefs quarterback Patrick Mahomes inspired his side to a 31-20 victory in Miami. They scored 21 points in less than 5 minutes. Novak Djokovic is now just 3 behind Roger Federer's record of 20 men's Grand Slam singles titles after winning the Australian Open. He came from 2 sets to 1 down to beat Dominic Thiem. And Sean Wayne is expected to be confirmed as the new head coach of the England Rugby League team later. The former Wigan boss would replace Australian Wayne Bennett.
Let's get to U.S. sports with Pete Fox. Pete?
The Lombardi heading back to Kansas City for the first time in 50 years as the Chiefs come from behind to beat the Niners 31-20, scoring 21 unanswered. Damian Williams, 104 and 1 touchdown on the ground. He also caught one for a score. Patrick Mahomes was named MVP, throwing for 286, 2 touchdowns and 2 picks. From the PGA Tour, Webb Simpson wins the Waste Management Phoenix Open in a playoff over Tony Finau. And on the ice early in the day, the Penguins edge the Caps in D.C. 4-3. I'm Pete Fox, that's your Bloomberg NBC World Sports Update.
Thanks very much, Pete. Still to come on Bloomberg Daybreak Europe, Christian Keller, Head of Economics Research at Barclays, joins us next. We'll get his take on UK growth as the EU and UK are due to lay out their stalls for upcoming trade negotiations. Lots more detail to understand about what the ambitions are on both sides. Some tough talk over the weekend from the UK camp. Sees the pound down 0.8% at 131 this morning. This is Bloomberg.
Not completing high school is more of a social thing than it was an academic thing. Even though all these years have passed, I still had that longing to have my diploma.
At age 30, Carissa finished her high school diploma.
If you're even considering getting your high school diploma, you can do it.
No one gets a diploma alone. If you're thinking of finishing your high school diploma, you have help. Find free adult education classes near you at finishyourdiploma.org. That's finishyourdiploma.org. Brought to you by the Dollar General Literacy Foundation and the Ad Council.
Investors who put their money on the line to help build U.S. infrastructure deserve to be protected. That's what we do at BAM. Our unconditional guarantee means investors receive every payment of interest and principal when due, period. BAM-insured bonds have a high AA stable rating from S&P, and BAM credit profiles provide complete transparency on each and every transaction. BAM Insured Bonds help build America's essential public projects. BAM, the feeling is mutual.
Message and data rates may apply. T&C and privacy terms can be found at babbel.com/terms. Please don't text and drive.
Have you wanted to speak a new language, but you thought it'd be too hard or take too much time? Then try Babbel for free by texting EXPLORE to 64,000. In just 15 minutes a day, you'll be on your way to speaking a new language in just a few weeks. And right now, you can try Babbel for free. Babbel starts out teaching you words and phrases by matching them with pictures. You won't believe how easy the interactive program is. Soon the sentences get a little bigger, and before you know it, you're having simulated conversations voiced by native speakers. And because Babbel is crafted by language experts and uses the spaced repetition method, in just 10 to 15 minutes a day, you'll be speaking the language of your choice with real confidence. With Babbel, you can speak a language. Just text EXPLORE to 64,000 and start your first lesson in the language of your choice for free. Download the Babbel app or text EXPLORE to 64,000 and try it for free. Text EXPLORE to 64,000.
Why has
Finding your perfect new home can be tough. So if you keep missing out,
it's time to search at
there are thousands of new properties to buy or rent every month at onthemarket.com. 24 hours or more before they're on Rightmove or Zoopla. See them first. Set up a property alert today.
Search onthemarket.com to find your perfect home.
If you're in the market, search onthemarket.com. See onthemarket.com/new and exclusive. Agents specify exclusivity.
Look at that. A riveting quest. A glorious opportunity. A scratch card. Yet he remains unfazed by the challenge, wavering at nothing.
Miss, please keep it down. We're in the quiet area.
Sorry. Here we are. The moment of truth. As he reaches...
Instant excitement with scratch cards from the National Lottery. Your numbers make amazing happen. Search Dream Big, Play Small. Rules and procedures apply. Players must be 16 or over.
At Ring, we've reinvented the doorbell. So no matter where you are, or what time of day, you can watch over your home and the things you care about. Ring Video Doorbell streams HD video and two-way talk straight to your phone, so you can speak to whoever's at your door from anywhere. Delivery.
Oh, great. Could you leave it with my neighbour, please?
Sure, no problem. And it's so simple, you can install it yourself in minutes. See, hear and speak to whoever's at your door from wherever you are with Ring Video Doorbell. Available at ring.com and selected retailers.
Good morning, this is your Southern service to London Victoria. Join in our onboard quiz. Here's our next clue. What sea sounds like a handheld party food but keeps you dry and protected from the rain? Not canapes, canopies.
At Southern Railway, we're investing over £7 million into making improvements for you, like canopies, cycle parking and new platform lighting across more of our stations. Find out more and book your tickets at southernrailway.com. Southern Railway, we're with you.
5 is in! What a run! Touchdown, Kansas City!
Congratulations to the Kansas City Chiefs on winning their first Super Bowl in 50 years and second in franchise history.
50, Watkins, 10, chase to the 5, into the end zone, touchdown! That may be all she wrote!
While the NFL's 100th season may be over, football never stops on TuneIn. Search NFL Podcast to stay current with all the off-season wheeling and dealing. And get ready for the 2020 NFL Draft in April.
You love TuneIn for live breaking news from CNN, MSNBC, Fox, CNBC, and more. But when you can't catch your favorite show as it airs, it might just be a click away as a podcast. Search your favorite news station to explore all the on-demand news shows on TuneIn.
Go courtside with the NBA on TuneIn. With the NBA on TuneIn, hear your favorite team and players take on their biggest rivals during the biggest games throughout the year, including regular season showdowns, the 2020 All-Star Game, and the NBA Finals in June, featuring the home and away calls for all 30 teams. Plus, with the NBA on demand, relive the best moments of the season by listening to the past games in their entirety. Listen to the NBA all season long on TuneIn.
Are you curious what others are listening to on TuneIn? Head to the trending section under Browse to see the most popular stations and podcasts among TuneIn listeners right now. Check it out. You might just discover something new for yourself.
When you're not listening to your team, take it to the end zone, the rim, or the net. Keep up with the biggest moments in sports by following TuneIn on social media.
Block, Cook into the end zone for the touchdown.
From reminders of the live top games to tips of the best sports stations and podcasts.
Welcome to Undisputed. We are live from Los Angeles. I'm Jenny Taft here with Skip
Follow
Bayless.
at TuneIn on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram to get the most out of TuneIn.
Markets, headlines, and breaking news 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, the Bloomberg Business app, and on QuickTake by Bloomberg. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
From Bloomberg's European headquarters here in London, I'm Caroline Hepker with this Bloomberg Radio Business Flash. So US stocks at 600. The index is actually flat right now. The FTSE 100 gains almost 0.3%. So European markets are steady. US futures have been heading higher all morning as we see gains, yes, for the Dow Jones, S&P 500 and NASDAQ futures this morning. Despite the savage open that we had in China, China's CSI 300 index ending the day down 7.9%, the biggest drop since 2015, on the first day back after that prolonged Lunar New Year holiday and the spread of coronavirus. The PBOC cutting rates, injecting cash into the financial system, but it wasn't enough to prevent that rout. We also saw the yuan weaken past 7 against the dollar. As for individual stocks, though, that we're watching here in Europe, where the tone, has to be said, is not quite as negative, Ryanair says that coronavirus could actually keep Europeans closer to home. So Europe's biggest low-cost airline sees its shares gain nearly 4% now. Meanwhile, Siemens Healthineers shares sink the most since its 2018 IPO after quarterly earnings fell 11%, so missing estimates for Siemens Healthineers. In terms of the other markets that we're watching, though, obviously the focus is on commodity markets because China is such a big consumer. Demand has dropped by 3 million barrels a day, or 20% of total consumption, according to people with inside knowledge of the energy industry in China. And oil markets this morning are trading WTI crude at $51.48, so down 0.1%. Brent crude down 0.7 at $56.23, but it's not limited to oil. We've also seen routes and big commodity price collapses for iron ore, copper and others. As for the bond markets, a quick check there. One spot at 5.3% for US benchmark yields, so up 2.5 basis points and negative 43 basis points flat for German bond yields. That is a Bloomberg Business Flash. Now here's Leanne Gerrans with more on what's going on around the world. Good morning.
Good morning, Caroline. Let's start in Hong Kong, where thousands of medical professionals have begun a 5-day strike today, which leader Carrie Lam says the government cannot accept. This comes after the government refused their demands to shut all entry points from China, despite the coronavirus outbreak on the mainland. Speaking earlier, Lam said Hong Kong has suspended 10 out of 13 border checkpoints. She also added that Hong Kong is to close the checkpoint at Hong Kong-Macau Ferry Pier. In other news, President Trump's impeachment trial is now drawing to a close. Republican senators are preparing to acquit the president. Senator Lamar Alexander is supporting the move to dismiss the charges. That's despite being among the few Republicans saying that withholding US aid to Ukraine was wrong, but he also says it should have been up to voters to decide President Trump's fate. And finally, the Kansas City Chiefs have defeated the San Francisco 49ers to win the 54th Super Bowl. It was Kansas City's first victory in 50 years. Quarterback Patrick Mahomes was named the game's most valuable player. According to one advertising executive, the win may help him rake in another $7 million a year in endorsements. Global news 24 hours a day on air and on QuickTake by Bloomberg, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. I'm Leanne Gerrans. This is Bloomberg Matt.
I just love the way you say. Can you say again the names of the teams?
Kansas City Chiefs and San Francisco 49ers.
The San Francisco 49ers. Losers. All right, Leanne, thanks very much. Leanne Gerrans there with your global news headlines. Nathan Hager joining us now to Washington, D.C.
Sounds like you stayed up for the whole thing, Matt.
You know what? I wish I could have. I really wish. I used to be able to do stuff like that.
Yeah.
Early morning.
Yeah, a little early for you. I understand that.
I could have actually gotten up to watch the game. I think it was 3:00 in the morning here. So I got up at 4, so
certainly doable.
An hour earlier. Yeah.
Why not?
I didn't think about it. All right, what do you got coming up for us?
Well, we're going to see if markets here in the U.S. Continue to hold up despite the deep sell-off from China overnight, with traders coming back there from the extended Lunar New Year to massive selling on those worries about coronavirus and its lingering economic impact. Reopening old wounds now with the U.S., left over from the trade war as Beijing sends harsh words over to Washington related to its response to the outbreak. We're going to get into all this with Christina Hooper of Invesco, Chief Global Market Strategist there, to get insights on how the market impact of coronavirus in China could potentially affect U.S. markets. Political risk could begin to be a factor for markets as well. The Iowa caucuses, finally, some actual voting happens in the Democratic presidential race, and we now see Bernie Sanders surging in the polls. Bloomberg Chief Washington correspondent Kevin Cirilli is in Des Moines to preview the first voting in the 2020 Democratic presidential race. That's all coming up with me and Karen Moscow on Bloomberg Daybreak on this post-Super Bowl morning, Matt.
All right. Thanks very much. Looking forward to it. Nathan Hager and Karen Moscow coming up next if you're listening on Sirius XM. If you're listening on London DAB digital radio, you'll hear Tom Keene and Francine Lacroix on Bloomberg Surveillance.
Matt, let's talk about where politics meets markets, but not with the UK focus for the moment, because sterling is considerably weaker today ahead of Boris Johnson setting out his vision for a UK-EU trade deal. The battle lines are being drawn up with the British Prime Minister due to say that he is ready to walk away from the talks if he doesn't get his way. But first, we are due to hear from the EU chief Brexit negotiator, Michel Barnier. He's going to be speaking shortly. Let's bring in Christian Keller, Head of Economics Research at Barclays. And Christian, looking to you for a bit of clarity as to what guides UK assets from here. We spoke to a guest on TV who said it's not going to be just the politics, it's not going to be just the underlying data, it's going to continue to be a mishmash of all those things.
Yeah, I think that is very true. I mean, we had obviously last week the decision by the Bank of England, as a lot of people thought maybe interest rate would be something that's guiding it. It looks now that we may not see anything from the Bank of England in terms of loosening monetary policy. Now I think the focus will be on trade talks, and there'll be a lot of debate of whether it is possible to have a harmonious exit by the end of the year. Will there be an extension? The extension would have been demanded by or requested by the middle of this year. That looks unlikely. And I think these questions will keep things very volatile.
And what do you expect then in terms of that volatility? I mean, how much will it pick up, or how much of a peak have we seen already?
Well, I think to a large extent the UK assets will also be determined what happens with global assets. I think we are going into a very crucial week with regard to the coronavirus. I think whatever happens to China is an indicator what happens to global markets given China's size, and why in particular we wouldn't look at Chinese markets necessarily as a harbinger to other asset markets, but what happened to the Chinese economy definitely is. And I think for the near future, I think actually that the issue of the coronavirus and its global impact will have an impact on UK assets.
So those things are much more important than right now. I think negotiations.
Yes, I think in the close. Well, we're going to see headlines today, but I think they are well anticipated, and markets will wonder whether some of this is just the usual, bolstering, if you want, at the beginning of a negotiation. But I think in the short run, the impact of the coronavirus on global growth will be something that is shaping global financial markets in the coming weeks.
I thought it was interesting. The briefings ahead of Boris Johnson's speech seem to suggest that the number 10 trying to recast this as a choice not between Canada and no deal, but Canada and something they called Australia. So this is a new one, so we'll delve into in the weeks ahead. I look at your research, though, Christian, and you've been talking about the impact on the Chinese economy of the coronavirus, and you've been trying to put some numbers on this, and you see an impact in 2020 on growth of between minus 0.1 and minus 1.3 percentage points. It's a wide range, but I suppose there's risk to the downside the longer we keep talking about this.
Exactly. If you go by the SARS virus of 2003, most of us would think it's going to be a Q1 impact, but that then is partly made up in the following quarters. The Chinese government has some ability and some room to stimulate on the fiscal side, but also on the monetary side. But if this lasts longer, and we're talking here about a scenario that is a low mortality but high contagious, highly infectious scenario, this could go extend several more months, then we're talking about, something that lasts several quarters. And then we get to these worst case scenarios of losing actually 1.3, not on a quarter, but for the year as a whole.
All right, Chris, thanks so much for joining us. Christian Keller is head of economics research at Barclays, and we can look forward to more from Christian if you stay tuned on on London DAB. You'll hear him on Bloomberg Surveillance. I just want to get a quick check, Anna, of these markets as we head into the third hour of trading here across Europe. We are still looking at gains, although they're slighter than they were earlier on European equity indexes. We're looking at the DAX up 0.2%, as is the CAC. The FTSE gaining about 20 points right now, about 0.3%. And we're seeing U.S. equity index futures that are just not quite as strong as they were at the beginning of the session. So we had gains of 0.5% or more across Dow, S&P, and NASDAQ mini futures. They're still gaining 0.25% to 0.33%, but they're just not the same strength as they were earlier.
And if you look at the sectors and the stocks that are moving the most, really interesting to see that the FTSE 100 is up 0.3%, despite that the worst performing sectors are oil and gas, basic resources, and banks is there as well. So these sectors that do tend to weigh on the FTSE not having enough of a negative impact today. There have been some interesting individual stories as well, haven't there, Matt? So away from the mining space and things affected by the coronavirus, we've seen some M&A activity in France, in Ingenico, and Worldline putting together Worldline buying Ingenico to make a big European payments player. That's clearly a big area for consolidation recently. This is Bloomberg.
What do you do to be an everyday superhero, like Dan?
So my baby boy Ben and me just wanted to share what we do to look after the environment. We put the wet wipes we use in the bin instead of down the loo. Would be pretty nasty if that lot ended up blocking our pipes.
Wet wipes and nappies block thousands of pipes every year. Save our sewers, rivers and seas by putting them in the bin, where they belong. Visit thameswater.co.uk/bin it. Together, we can care for the environment.
Do you do the same thing every weekend? You know, meet up with the same friends for brunch, browse around the same shops, eat the same Saturday night takeaway. Mine's a lamb balti with mushroom pilau rice. Snuggle up next to the same person and watch the same brain-numbing reality TV. Then maybe it's time to switch it up. Starting with the all-new Vauxhall Corsa, with its bold styling and up to 70 miles per gallon. To switch it up, visit your local Vauxhall dealership or search New Corsa. Official WLTP test figures for comparison purposes only. Real-world figures may vary.
It's already chilly in London, and you know that dodgy boiler is on its last legs. So if the thought of no heating makes you break out in a cold sweat, talk to British Gas. You can spread the cost of a new boiler interest-free over 2 years and get £200 off when you get a quote by the 29th of February, or £400 off for existing home care customers. British Gas, here to solve. Search British Gas new boiler. Conditions apply.
Of the world, 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, on the Bloomberg Business app, and on Quick Take by Bloomberg. This is Bloomberg Radio.
Live from the Bloomberg Interactive Brokers studios, this is Bloomberg Daybreak for Monday, February 3rd, 2020. Coming up this hour.
Chinese stocks plunge as investors get their first chance to sell after the Lunar New Year holiday.
Fears over the coronavirus spread as the death toll and confirmed cases accelerate.
And it's a big week for U.S. politics as the first-in-the-nation vote gets underway in Iowa.
President Trump prepares for tomorrow's State of the Union address as his impeachment trial continues. I'm Michael Barr. More ahead.
I'm Rob Bushka. Coming up in sports, the Chiefs rally to win their first Super Bowl in 50 years, and Tom Brady has more left in the tank.
That's all straight ahead on Bloomberg Daybreak. On Bloomberg 1130 New York, Bloomberg 99.1 Washington, D.C., Bloomberg 106.1 Boston, Bloomberg 960 San Francisco, Sirius XM 119, and around the world on BloombergRadio.com and via the Bloomberg Business app.
I'm Karen Moscow.
I'm Nathan Hager. Bloomberg Daybreak brought to you by SEI. Visionary asset managers find opportunity where others are challenged. Exploit disruption's potential with SEI's global operating platform. Find out how at seic.com/IMS.
And U.S. futures are gaining to start the week. It is 5:01 on Wall Street, and we check the markets every 15 minutes throughout the trading day on Bloomberg. S&P futures up 10 points this morning. Dow futures up 71. NASDAQ futures up 34. The DAX in Germany's up 0.1%. So is the CAC in Paris. The FTSE 100 up 0.4%. Nikkei 225 in Japan down 1%. The Hang Seng in Hong Kong gained 0.2%. 10-year Treasury down 6/30 seconds. Yield 1.52%. Yield on the 2-year 1.33%. NYMEX crude oil is down 0.25% or 14 cents at $51.42 a barrel. COMEX gold is down 0.3% or $4.40 at $15.8350 an ounce. The euro 1.1073 against the dollar, and the yen is at 108.50. Nathan.
And Karen, we begin in Asia, where Chinese stocks led declines in the region on fears over the coronavirus. The benchmark gauge in Shanghai plunged nearly 8% as investors hit the panic button in their first day back from the Lunar New Year holiday. Bloomberg's Juliet Sally joins us from Singapore now with details. Good morning, Juliet.
Good morning, Nathan and Karen. The CSI 300 closed lower by 7.8% to 3,688 points, its biggest one-day drop since the equity bubble burst in August of 2015. On the open, all three major Chinese indexes shed more than 9% before some buyers stepped in after the PBOC cut rates and injected liquidity into the system. More than 2,600 stocks in China fell by the 10% daily limit, while the onshore yuan tumbled more than 1%. The yield on China's most actively traded 10-year government bond plunged 18 basis points to 2.8%. In commodities, China's benchmark iron ore contract declined by its daily limit of 8%, while crude and palm oil also sank by the maximum allowed. In Singapore, I'm Juliet Saleh, Bloomberg Daybreak.
All right, Juliet, thank you. Officials in China tried to ward off panic selling by injecting liquidity into the money market. Still, the sell-off was dramatic. Willem Sells is chief market strategist at HSBC.
In the short term, we're not yet buyers. We think that there is just too much uncertainty at this point in time. Part of the correction that we've had is a correction from excessive rally in December and January.
While the longevity and scale of the outbreak remains unclear, there's little doubt it'll have a major drag on China's growth. About 2/3 of the economy remain shut this week.
Crude is falling again today. Sources inside China's energy industry tell us oil demand has dropped by 20% of total consumption. We get more from Bloomberg's Steven Stapczynski in Singapore.
Overall, their demand has stalled at 3 million barrels a day, and it's affecting the market. But if China were to bring back that demand, and if this were to recover quickly, traders in the market are telling me that you could quickly see prices jump back up if that were to happen.
The Citigroup is slashing its forecast for oil, saying Brent crude could fall as low as $47 a barrel. It doesn't see a recovery until the fourth quarter. Checking prices on Brent now, they're at $56.24 a barrel. That's a loss of about 2/3 of 1%. West Texas Intermediate crude is little changed, down about a penny to $51.53.
At last count, the death toll from the virus passed 360, with confirmed cases jumping past 17,000. Stephen Morrison is Director of Global Health Policy at the Center for Strategic and International Studies.
This was approaching a true pandemic, and that's the language that's being used right now. There's a sense that the numbers of truly infected within China are grossly underestimated. We know that the transmissibility is very, very fast. This is going to scale and move beyond China in all likelihood.
The Philippines is reporting the first death from the virus outside of China. California has confirmed 2 new cases, bringing total infections in the U.S. to 11.
Well, meantime, China's kick-starting a clinical trial to test a drug for the virus. A new antiviral drug from Gilead Sciences will be tested by a medical team from a hospital in Beijing. They'll use a placebo-controlled study on patients with mild and moderate symptoms in Wuhan, the city that is ground zero for the outbreak. Shares of Gilead are up 14% in early trading.
Pressure is building on President Xi Jinping to contain the outbreak. He's taken personal control of the response, enacting measures like the quarantine of more than 50 million people and rapidly building 2 new hospitals. Max Baucus is former U.S. ambassador to China.
President Xi also knows he's kind of under the gun now. So the people of China and also the people around the world, especially the people in China, will be looking at him. Is he going to handle this well? Is he going to be our guy that we can trust in the future? It depends on how well he handles it.
At the same time, Beijing is blasting the U.S. for its reaction to the virus. The foreign ministry says American authorities have inappropriately overreacted and not provided much help to counter the outbreak.
Well, as that political pressure builds, it is also a big week for U.S. politics. Tonight, Iowa holds the first in the nation vote for Democratic candidates to take on President Trump. Bloomberg's David Weston is in Iowa for tonight's caucuses. He brings us a preview from the Hawkeye State.
Right now, it looks like Bernie Sanders has been gathering momentum as we go into these caucuses, and he is thought to at least have a lot of passion behind him, which is terribly important, particularly in these caucuses, because they all get together and try to persuade one another. And some people would say, also, do they want to win? Because they want to win. A lot of people think that's not necessarily to go to the extremes. It's more to go down the center. And that's one of the big issues that's being debated out here in Iowa is who's the most electable. Maybe we should go with Joe Biden, even if we're not as excited about him, because we think he can beat Donald Trump, as opposed to something like a Bernie Sanders or Mary Elizabeth Warren we are excited about. We're not sure they can beat him.
Bloomberg's David Weston reporting from Iowa. He'll also anchor our live coverage of tonight's vote. You can catch that at 10 p.m. Wall Street time on Bloomberg Radio and Television. Straight ahead, the latest world and national news. This is Bloomberg. At 5:07 on Wall Street, we bring in Michael Barr for a check of what's going on around the world. Good Monday morning, Michael.
Good morning, Nathan. President Donald Trump is set to give his State of the Union address tomorrow night in the Capitol, where his impeachment trial is still underway. Trump has become just the third president in U.S. history to be impeached, but he is expected to be acquitted in his Senate trial on Wednesday. On CBS's Face the Nation, lead House impeachment manager Adam Schiff says that he and his team will still continue with their arguments against the president.
I'm not letting the senators off the hook. We're still going to go into the Senate this week and make the case why this president needs to be removed. It will be up to the senators to make that final judgment, and the senators will be held accountable for it.
CBS's Face the Nation can be heard Sundays on Bloomberg Radio. Meanwhile, Republican Senator Lamar Alexander, who voted against having witnesses in the trial, said President Trump called the president of Ukraine and asked him to become involved in investigating Joe Biden. Alexander also says that the president delayed the military and other assistance to Ukraine in order to encourage that investigation.
He shouldn't have done it. And I said he shouldn't have done it. And now I think it's up to the American people to say, okay, good economy, lower taxes, conservative judges, behavior that I might not like, call to Ukraine, weigh that against Elizabeth Warren or Bernie Sanders and pick a president.
Alexander spoke on NBC's Meet the Press, which also can be heard Sundays on Bloomberg Radio. Tonight is the Iowa caucus. An Emerson College poll of likely Democratic caucus goers released yesterday shows Bernie Sanders leading with 28% support. Joe Biden is second with 21%, followed by Pete Buttigieg at 15% and Elizabeth Warren at 14%. New York Health Department officials say 3 people in the city are now being tested for coronavirus. Meanwhile, next weekend's New York City Lunar New Year Parade in Chinatown will go on as planned. Some Asian Americans in the city report on being the receiving part of racism focused on the coronavirus originating in China, with pointed suggestions to shut down this year's celebration. However, New York State Senator John Liu says taking common sense precautions will keep parade goers safe.
Be tolerant, as we always are as New Yorkers, and be hardy, dress warm, be cautious, but come out to the parade next Sunday.
Global news 24 hours a day on air and on Quick Take by Bloomberg, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. I'm Michael Barr. This is Bloomberg. Nathan.
Thanks, Michael. 5:09 on Wall Street. Time for the Bloomberg NBC Sports Update on this morning after a Super Bowl for the ages. Good morning, Rob Bushka.
Good morning, Nathan. Congratulations to the Kansas City Chiefs, Super Bowl champs for the first time since 1970, capping a 10-point comeback Sunday in Miami.
Under center Mahomes, second down, 6 from the 38. Handoff to Williams, got a block from the fullback. He's at the 35, the 30, breaks a tackle on the sideline, 20, chasing him down the sideline, the 10, the 5, touchdown! That's it!
Westwood won on the call in Super Bowl 54. Quarterback Patrick Mahomes becomes the youngest Super Bowl MVP as the Chiefs beat the San Francisco 49ers 31-20. Mahomes had 286 yards and 2 touchdowns. A well-balanced attack. Damian Williams had 104 yards rushing. Tyreek Hill 105 yards receiving for the Chiefs. It's the first Super Bowl win for Coach Andy Reid, who picked up win number 222 of his career. And leave it to the expert odds makers in Las Vegas. You knew it would happen. As soon as the Super Bowl was finished, the Chiefs named a 6-1 favorite to win it all next season. Could be bad news for the rest of the AFC East, except for Patriots fans. Tom Brady revealed his future intentions in a Hulu commercial.
They say all good things must come to an end. So to my teammates, my family, and my fans, you deserve to hear this from me. I'm not going anywhere.
Brady will be a free agent for the first time in his career, March 18th. In the NBA, 4 games, all home teams winners by an average of 14. Detroit beat Denver, Houston dumped New Orleans, Milwaukee crushed Phoenix, and Toronto pounded Chicago. College hoops, Georgetown rallied from 17 down to beat St. John's 73-72. 18th ranked Iowa outlasted number 19 Illinois. That's your NBC Bloomberg Sports Update. Nathan?
Man, Rob, winning the Super Bowl will be very lucrative for MVP Patrick Mahomes. In addition to his $124,000 bonus, one advertising executive says he could rake in as much as $7 million a year in additional endorsement income. Futures pointing to a higher open on Wall Street. This is Bloomberg.
Business is constantly evolving. Is your financial printer evolving to keep ahead of the curve? At Command Financial, we are redefining financial printing by providing industry-leading expertise, leveraging technology, and honing processes and best practices. Every day, Command helps SEC registrants, as well as members of their working groups, including securities attorneys and investment bankers, prepare, file, and disseminate regulatory and disclosure documents, such as registration statements, M&A documents, and mutual fund prospectuses and reports. Command provides a full range of services to help you effectively complete your deal, meet your disclosure requirements, and achieve your shareholder communications objectives. Visit our website at commandfinancial.com and learn how we're evolving, not only with the times, but also with your business requirements. Command Financial, redefining financial printing.
Why is delivering the best client experience a top priority at BNY Mellon's Pershing? Michelle Feinstein, Director of Client Engagement, explains.
Today's investors want a financial relationship that's on demand, customized, and leverages the latest digital technology. At BNY Mellon's Pershing, helping advisory firms and broker-dealers create great experiences for their clients is our priority. Through our integrated wealth experience, we give you a high-touch service, flexible technology choices, and expert insights, so you can deliver a highly personalized experience to your clients at every step, from onboarding to wealth planning, to performance analysis and more. And because we're part of BNY Mellon, you'll benefit from more than 230 years of strength and stability. At Pershing, we're personally invested in your success.
Visit Pershing.com to learn more about Pershing's integrated wealth experience. Pershing LLC and Pershing Advisor Solutions LLC are both members of FINRA and SIPC.
Message and data rates may apply. T&C and premise.
Let's get this right, sir. You didn't see 3 men dressed as clowns take off in a van with a Renaissance painting because you were distracted by, and I quote, a sporty red compact SUV with a bold mesh grille, a sculpted bonnet with sweeping roofline on diamond-cut alloys.
And beautiful rear haunches.
So, you saw a Jaguar E-Pace. But what about the clowns?
What clowns?
Jaguar E-Pace, designed to steal attention. Search Jaguar E-Pace.
I spy with my little eye something beginning with P.
People.
No, parrot.
I'll have to remember my binoculars next time.
Although you might not be able to see it, your small actions can have a real impact with Shell. Every time you fill up and use Shell Go Plus, you'll be protecting and replanting forests around the world. Make the change. Drive carbon neutral. Shell. Go well. See goplus.shell.com/CO2 for details.
Whatever job you're searching for, you can find it on LinkedIn. First jobs, flexible jobs, keep me out the cold jobs, advertising jobs, accounting jobs, HR, PR, even ER jobs, East London jobs, West London jobs, extra hour in bed jobs, startup jobs, late start jobs, get home in the daylight jobs, banking jobs, building jobs, flexible working on a Friday jobs, or even voiceover jobs, which is how I ended up recording this ad. Search millions of jobs on LinkedIn and find one meant for you.
This is not a cat. This is not a rocket. And this is not a sail.
That's right. At Smarty Mobile, we're not having a sale. While others are slashing prices, we're introducing our best ever new plans. Take our new 30 gig data SIM for just £10 a month. With unlimited calls and texts and no speed restrictions, credit checks or contract tying you down, why shop around? New plans, great value. Now that's Smarty. Grab yours today. Search Smarty Mobile. See smarty.co.uk for terms.
Double Line CEO Jeffrey Gundlach says he now sees a 90% chance for a Fed rate cut this year. Christine Todd, head of fixed income for the U.S. at Amundi Asset Management, is with us. The Fed is already accommodative. We got 75 bips of reductions in 2019. It's not really a lot more the Fed can do here.
If you look at the dots, the Fed is anticipating actually a hike in 2021 and the terminal rate to be about 2.5%. The market is pricing in 25 basis point cut in the end of this year, moved up from December to November based on the coronavirus, and another 25 basis point cut the following year. Based on our bullishness of the consumer, small business sector, accommodative Fed, presidential policy, which importantly instituted a major tax cut and has decreased the cost of regulation to businesses from about $120 billion to almost zero. And this is all very stimulative, and we see, signs of inflation percolating. We don't see that the Phillips curve is dead at all. So we would disagree with Gundlach, and we would be more steady and take a longer-term view in terms of the economic strength and stability.
Hear more interviews like this one on Bloomberg Television, streaming live on Bloomberg.com and on the Bloomberg mobile app, or check your local cable listings. Markets, headlines, and breaking news 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, the Bloomberg Business app, and on Quick Take by Bloomberg. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
And I'm Karen Moscow. U.S. stock index futures are on the rise. European stocks are as well, drifting a bit, though, following steep losses at the end of last week. And as investors digest the latest developments in the coronavirus outbreak, shares plunged in China as markets there reopened after a long holiday. We check the markets every 15 minutes throughout the trading day on Bloomberg. S&P futures up 14 points this morning. Dow futures up 99. NASDAQ futures up 44. The DAX in Germany's up 0.2%. 10-year Treasury down 7/30 seconds, yield 1.53%. Yield on the 2-year, 1.33%. NYMEX crude oil is up 0.5% or 28 cents at $51.83 a barrel. COMEX gold is down 1/3% or $5.80 at $15.82.10 an ounce. The euro, 1.1067 against the dollar. The yen at 108.51. The British pound at 1.3071. Today we're watching for reports on construction spending and manufacturing out at 10 o'clock Wall Street time, and Google parent Alphabet among companies scheduled to report earnings today. That's a Bloomberg Business Flash. Now here's Michael Barr with more on what's going on around the world. Michael, good morning.
Good morning, Karen. President Trump prepares for tomorrow night's State of the Union address. It comes as Trump's impeachment trial continues in the Senate. Today, the Iowa caucuses take place. Hong Kong CEO Carrie Lam has ordered new border closings with mainland China over fears of the growing spread of the coronavirus. This as hospital workers in Hong Kong are threatening to walk off the jobs. Workers say they are being put in danger on the front lines because of visitors from Wuhan, and they also are calling for protective equipment. The Kansas City Chiefs have ended a half a century of Super Bowl frustration. The Chiefs defeated the San Francisco 49ers 31-20 last night. On the ice, the Capitals lost. In tennis, Novak Djokovic has won a record-extending 8th Australian Open championship, beating Dominic Thiem. Global news 24 hours a day, on air and on Quick Take by Bloomberg, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. I'm Michael Barr. This is Bloomberg. Nathan.
All right, Michael, thank you. It is 5:19 on Wall Street and live from the Bloomberg Interactive Brokers Studios. This is Bloomberg Daybreak. We welcome on this Monday morning Christina Hooper, Chief Global Market Strategist at Invesco. Good to have you with us on this Monday morning, Christina, as we watch U.S. and European markets hold up despite the dramatic sell-off overnight in Asia. Do you think markets in the U.S. have fully priced in the impact that this coronavirus outbreak could have on this side of the world?
Well,
Well, it's unclear if markets have fully priced it in. What we're likely to see is short-term episodic sell-offs as more information is gathered, more data is released on the outbreak. There are still a lot of unknowns, but for right now, it makes sense that U.S. and European markets are holding up, just given that what we've seen in Asia is really a catch-up after having been closed for a week. So this is really pricing in what the U.S. and Europe priced in last week.
What further volatility are you looking for, if at all, in U.S. markets?
Well, I would expect it not to be dramatically higher, but I think we could see some episodic bouts of volatility, intraday perhaps even, just because there's likely to be more negative news flow before the situation improves. Keep in mind, we also have some concerns about economic growth in the U.S. We've got a pretty abysmal Chicago PMI print on Friday. So there's just going to be more sensitivity economic data as well as concerns about coronavirus.
And of course, we have more ISM data coming out today. How could that factor into what we see in the market action this week?
Well, it could provide some relief. If we get a good ISM manufacturing number today, that would really do a lot to negate what we saw in the Chicago PMI on Friday.
Do you see any buy opportunities from the fluctuations that we've seen over the last week or so as this coronavirus epidemic has played out?
Well, definitely I see some buying opportunities. They may not actually come into the fore for a bit longer. I go back to SARS and look at stock market performance, particularly for China. And what we saw was a deterioration in stock market prices for a couple of months into the epidemic, and then a pretty swift improvement in the stock market. So buying opportunities will appear, will certainly get better, most likely, as we move forward in the month of February.
Do you see this situation affecting how companies alter their forward guidance as we head into the better part of earnings season here? Do companies need to sort of hedge their bets a little more?
Well, it certainly depends on the industry. Those at the front lines will definitely need to hedge their bets. Other industries may have that have less exposure may not focus as much on the impact of something like coronavirus.
So what are you looking for from earnings as we hear from even more companies this week? What are your expectations?
Well, I think we're going to see a similar pattern that we've seen in the past, in that companies have managed expectations and then they come in and meet or exceed them. So what matters most to me in this earnings season is really to hear guidance about the future. And I think that guidance that is somewhat positive and optimistic will be very well received in this environment.
When you have the economic outlook showing signs of slowness, are the companies adjusting their guidance adequately to account for some of the expectations that we're seeing of global economic slowdown?
Well, so far, for the most part, that seems to be the case. But keep in mind that some of the deteriorating data has not shown up until quite recently. And so I'm not sure that all companies have been adequately able to address that. But I think in general, companies have been very thoughtful and careful in terms of providing their outlooks as part of that greater campaign to manage expectations.
All right, Christina Hooper, always good to get your insights. Thanks so much for being here with us. That's Christina Hooper, Chief Global Market Strategist at Invesco. And following the dramatic sell-off we saw in particularly the Chinese markets overnight, futures on Wall Street pointing to a bit of a pickup, with S&P futures higher by 12 points right now, Dow futures ahead by 92 points, NASDAQ futures a gain of almost 35 points. DAX in Germany and CAC in Paris both up 0.2%. The 10-year's down, 7/30 seconds yield 1.53%, 2-year 1.33% yield. You're listening to Bloomberg Daybreak.
This is a Bloomberg Money Minute. U.S. stock indicators point to a move higher at the open, despite China's market reopening to the worst sell-off in years. For mainland China investors, it was the first chance to trade since January 23rd, after officials extended the Lunar New Year break due to the coronavirus outbreak. Virus worries sent stocks tumbling on Wall Street Friday. The Dow lost about 600 points, and U.S. stocks gave up their gains for the year. China has started a clinical trial to speedily test a drug for the coronavirus. Remdesivir, a new antiviral drug made by Gilead Sciences, will be tested by a medical team from a Beijing-based hospital. And each member of the Kansas City Chiefs gets a $124,000 bonus for winning the Super Bowl last night. But one advertising executive says Chiefs quarterback Patrick Mahomes will rake in as much as $7 million a year in additional endorsement income as a result of beating the San Francisco 49ers. Dow futures up 85, NASDAQ futures up 38, and the S&P futures are up 12. Gina Cervetti, Bloomberg Radio.
Hey y'all, Jeff Foxworthy here. Now, if you've ever found yourself repeating the same thing over and over for 75 years, you might be Smokey Bear.
Only you can prevent wildfires.
That's why I'm filling in for Smokey to switch things up, because there's a lot more to say. And I should know because my grandfather was a firefighter. And one of the things he taught me is that the people that love the outdoors the most are often the ones accidentally starting wildfires, which means always BYOB. No, bring your own bucket to the campfire. And be extra careful with things like burning yard trimmings. Don't just walk away, or chances are you might be starting a wildfire. So for the love of the outdoors, go to SmokeyBear.com to learn more about wildfire prevention. Brought to you by the U.S. Forest Service, your state forester, and the Ad Council.
Finding your perfect new home can be tough. So if you keep missing out,
it's time to search at On the Market.
There are thousands of new properties to buy or rent every month at onthemarket.com. 24 hours or more before they're on Rightmove or Zoopla.
On the Market.
See them first. Set up a property alert today.
Search onthemarket.com to find your perfect home.
If you're in the market, search onthemarket.com. See onthemarket.com/new and exclusive. Agents specify exclusivity.
Where are we?
The New Forest.
But I thought we only had the Mini Countryman booked for a test drive. We can't stay here.
We're not going to.
This isn't exactly what I meant.
Relax. With Mini's new 48-hour test drive, you can use the Countryman for exactly what it's built for. Exploring. Plus, it's an SUV, the largest Mini in the range, so you can pack loads more in.
Great. Where next?
Well, you know how you've always wanted to try kayaking?
The Mini Countryman 48-hour test drive. Visit mini.co.uk to book yours. Mini. Who's in? Test drive subject to status and availability. Terms and conditions apply. Participating Mini retailers only.
At Ring, we've reinvented the doorbell. So no matter where you are, or what time of day, you can watch over your home and the things you care about. Ring Video Doorbell streams HD video and two-way talk straight to your phone, so you can speak to whoever's at your door from anywhere.
Delivery.
Oh, great. Could you leave it with my neighbour, please?
Sure, no problem.
And it's so simple, you can install it yourself in minutes. See, hear and speak to whoever's at your door from wherever you are with Ring Video Doorbell. Available at ring.com and selected retailers.
Why would anyone shop at TK Maxx? I don't have the time.
Well, you can still look fine, because there's big brand deals at TK Maxx online.
Ooh, TKMaxx.com.
Ridiculous possibilities are here to stay when you TK Maxx the right way.
Good morning, this is your Southern service to London Victoria. Join in our onboard quiz. Here's our next clue. What C sounds like a handheld party food but keeps you dry and protected from the rain? Not canapes, canopies.
At Southern Railway, we're investing over £7 million into making improvements for you, like canopies, cycle parking and new platform lighting across more of our stations. Find out more and book your tickets at southernrailway.com. Southern Railway, we're with you.
Welcome to Cathay Island. We hope you've enjoyed flying Cathay Airways. Oh, and Cathay, congratulations on the Euro Millions win.
This Friday's Euro Millions is a massive £105 million super jackpot. That's dream come true money. Euro Millions from the National Lottery. Your numbers make amazing happen. Estimated jackpot. Rules and procedures apply. Players must be 16 or over.
Casting live from the Bloomberg Interactive Broker Studio in New York. Bloomberg 1130 to Washington, D.C. Bloomberg 99.1 to Boston. Bloomberg 106.1 to San Francisco. Bloomberg 960 to the country. Sirius XM Channel 119 and around the globe. The Bloomberg Business app and BloombergRadio.com. This is Bloomberg Daybreak.
And it's 5:30 on Wall Street. Good morning. I'm Karen Moscow.
And I'm Nathan Hager. Bloomberg Daybreak brought to you by BNY Mellon's Pershing. Learn why the world's most sophisticated advisory firms and broker-dealers rely on Pershing to help them improve profitability, create efficiency, attract talent, and manage risk at Pershing.com.
And we're just about 4 hours away from the opening of U.S. trading. Let's get you up to date on the news you need to know at this hour. U.S. futures are gaining after a sharp sell-off in China. The Shanghai Composite plunged 7.8% as investors hit the panic button in their first day back from the Lunar New Year holiday. Fears over the coronavirus are spreading as the death toll and confirmed cases accelerate. We get the very latest from Bloomberg's Selena Wang in Beijing.
The number of cases has blown past 17,000, with more than 360 deaths over the weekend. You also had the first known case of a death outside of China. It was a 44-year-old man who had come from Wuhan and was visiting the Philippines. But I do want to put things into perspective that the U.S. Centers for Disease Control and Prevention recently released data showing that this flu season, more than 19 million Americans have become sick with the flu so far, and that about 10,000 Americans have died.
Meantime, Beijing is blasting the U.S. for its reaction to the virus. The foreign ministry says American authorities have, quote, inappropriately overreacted and not provided much help to counter the outbreak. This as the U.S. sends more flights to China's Hubei province to evacuate citizens.
As pressure builds to contain the outbreak, China is kickstarting a clinical trial to test a drug for the virus. A new antiviral drug from Gilead Sciences will be tested by a medical team from a hospital in Beijing. Shares of Gilead are up 12% in early trading.
And S&P futures are higher by 0.4%. It is another big week for earnings. Nearly 100 companies in the S&P 500 are set to report beginning today with Alphabet. Here with more, Bloomberg's Larry Kofsky.
The quarterly results will be Alphabet's first since Sundar Pichai took over as CEO, and Bloomberg Intelligence says it should demonstrate continued momentum with mobile search, YouTube, and cloud driving sales. Alphabet may disclose cloud sales this year as the run rate tops $10 billion. That information may change the perception of Google's long-term growth story. Larry Kofsky, Bloomberg Daybreak.
Larry, thank you. S&P futures are higher, up about 13 points. Dow futures up 96. NASDAQ futures up 38. The DAX in Germany is up 0.2%. CAC in Paris up 0.2%. And the FTSE 100 is up 0.4%. 10-year Treasury down 8/30 seconds, yield 1.53%. And the yield on the 2-year 1.33%. And the euro 1.1066 against the dollar. Straight ahead, the latest world and national news. And this is Bloomberg.
All right, thanks, Karen. It's 5:33 on Wall Street, and Michael Barr has more on what's going on around the world. Good morning, Michael.
Good morning, Nathan. This is a very busy week on the U.S. political scene, beginning with the Iowa caucuses today. Bloomberg's Ed Baxter has the story.
Going into today, it is all so fluid. All the polling shows there are 4, possibly 5 candidates who can come up on top. It is a larger than usual pool, and the outcome will give an indication of where Democrats may lean, to the left or moderate. Also today, final argument in the Trump impeachment trial with acquittal all but certain. House Manager Adam Schiff says he's going to make the arguments.
I'm not letting the senators off the hook. We're still going to go into the Senate this week and make the case why this president needs to be removed.
State of the Union tomorrow, final impeachment vote Wednesday, Democratic debate on Friday in San Francisco. I'm Ed Baxter, Bloomberg Daybreak.
Secretary of State Mike Pompeo says the U.S. is demanding demonstrable evidence from the Taliban that they can and will reduce violence before signing a deal that would lead to Afghanistan peace talks and a withdrawal of American troops from the country. Pompeo says a deal is close, but that they have been close before, and the deal failed. As for the U.S. presence in Afghanistan,
President Trump's made no equivocation about our desire to reduce the American presence in Afghanistan. We're aiming to do that. We're working diligently to do that in a way that delivers on peace and reconciliation.
Pompeo, speaking in Uzbekistan, says more work remains to be done so that peace talks between Afghanistan's warring parties can get started. Officials in London say a man strapped on a fake bomb and stabbed people on a street in the central part of the city yesterday. Armed officers shot the suspect dead at the scene. Deputy Assistant Police Commissioner Lucy Dorsey.
One man, who is in his 40s, was initially considered to be in a life-threatening condition. However, we are thankful that following his treatment at hospital, this is no longer the case.
Police say the suspect, 20-year-old Sudesh Aman, was recently released from prison after serving time for terrorism offenses. Global news 24 hours a day, on air and on Quick Take by Bloomberg. Powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. I'm Michael Barr. This is Bloomberg, Nathan.
All right, Michael, thank you. 5:35 on Wall Street. Time for the Bloomberg NBC Sports Update. Good morning, Rob Bushka.
Good morning, Nathan. 50 years to be exact for Chiefs Kingdom since they hoisted the Lombardi Trophy. The number one offense in the NFL needed their defense to come up clutch in the waning moments of Super Bowl 54.
Second and 10, Garoppolo, shotgun snap from his 25. Five-man rush, winds up, long pass down the middle, leaping attempt, and it's a leaping pickoff. Intercepted by Fuller, downfield, near the 42 of Kansas City.
Westwood won on the call. 49ers quarterback Jimmy Garoppolo intercepted twice as Kansas City beats San Francisco 31-20 in Miami. Chiefs quarterback Patrick Mahomes, at age 24, becomes the youngest Super Bowl MVP. One of his main targets, Sammy Watkins, was the reason why.
Stay strong, resilient. We've been down many times. We just fought through it. We stayed strong. It was ups and downs, flows of the game. Man, we just kept on leading, man. Everybody on this team, every player, every coach, man, we just kept on fighting, man. It's amazing.
Watkins averaged 20 yards per catch on 5 receptions. The Chiefs outscored the 49ers 21-0 in the fourth quarter. Patriots quarterback Tom Brady, in a Hulu commercial, told his fans he's not going anywhere. To the hardwood, the Bucs got 30 points, 19 boards from Giannis to beat the Suns. Raptors crushed the Bulls. James Harden had 40 as the Rockets took down the Pelicans, and the Pistons withstood a monstrous triple-double from Nikola Jokic with 39 points to beat the Nuggets in overtime. Golf, Waste Management Open in Scottsdale. Webb Simpson birdied the final 2 holes, forced a playoff, and then beat Tony Finau. Tennis from down under in triple-digit heat. Novak Djokovic wins another major. He takes care of Dominic Thiem in 5 sets. That's your NBC Bloomberg Sports Update. Nathan?
Thank you, Rob. 5:37 on Wall Street. The latest edition of Bloomberg Business Week is on newsstands now, with the cover on Tesla CEO Elon Musk taking drastic steps to silence short sellers. Also in this week's issue, the startups pairing up freelancers with work buddies. Dimitra Kesanides contributed to the story for Bloomberg Business Week.
We write about these companies. They're kind of like these online work clubs, and you log on and you find a work buddy.
Read more about this and other stories in this week's edition of Bloomberg Business Week on newsstands now and online at businessweek.com. And terminal customers can receive a complimentary subscription at MAG Go. Listen to Business Week with Carol Master and Jason Kelly right here on Bloomberg Radio, and watch it on YouTube weekdays from 2 to 6 p.m. Wall Street time. Get global business, finance, and tech news on your TV, computer, or mobile device. Just head over to youtube.com and search Bloomberg Global News. It's 5:38 on Wall Street. Time for the Tri-State Business Report with Bloomberg's Ed Corey. Good morning, Ed.
Hey, Nathan. New York City officials say yellow cab drivers should adopt surge pricing to compete with ride-sharing companies like Uber and Lyft. The city's taxi medallion task force is out with a report claiming at least 950 medallion owners have filed for bankruptcy. New Jersey lawmakers are reconsidering legislation to phase out single-use plastic and paper bags. The plan failed to advance in the legislature's last session, but now the Senate Environment and Energy Committee has advanced the bill. It would also prohibit styrofoam. Connecticut's Attorney General William Tong is blaming New England's regional power grid for continued high electric rates in the state. He says ISO New England failed to follow a competitive bidding process as is required by law. That's your Bloomberg Tri-State Business Report. I'm Ed Corey. Nathan?
All right, Ed, thank you. It's 5:39 on Wall Street. Bloomberg Radio is on the air from San Francisco to New York, London to Hong Kong. Let's check in with our global news team for some of the top stories heard on our 300 affiliate radio stations around the world.
I'm
I'm Steve Podolsky, and on KNX in Los Angeles, we're talking about Disney solidifying its control over the Hulu streaming service.
I'm Gina Cervetti, and on WFLA in Orlando, I'm reporting that President Donald Trump has signed an executive order aimed at stemming the flow of foreign counterfeit goods sold on sites like Amazon, eBay, and Walmart.com. I'm Caroline Hepgirl, Bloomberg DAB Digital Radio in London. We're reporting on Boris Johnson's speech setting out his demands for EU trade negotiations.
I'm Courtney Donahoe on WHAS in Louisville. Lexus posted a 10% sales gain last year on strength in China.
I'm Ed Corey on KFBK in Sacramento. I'm reporting PG&E will overhaul its board of directors.
Those are some of the stories our 2,700 Bloomberg journalists and analysts are working on this morning around the world. And some other stories we're watching. U.S. health regulators approving the first drug for children and teenagers with peanut allergies. The drug will be sold under the brand name Palforzia. It'll be marketed by Aimmune Therapeutics, which is higher by almost 22% in early trading. Job cuts on the way at Julius Baer. The Swiss private bank will eliminate 300 positions to create a leaner business with better profit margins. It's also dropping a target for net new money after missing its goal for last year. Shares down more than 4% in Zurich. And Ryanair posted a profit for its winter low season. The budget airline was boosted by lucrative last-minute bookings over the Christmas and New Year's holidays. Its shares are higher by 4.5% in London.
Asset managers who seize change to launch new strategies, add distribution channels, or exploit new technology to re-engineer the investor experience are often rewarded. However, in an industry paralyzed with complexity, few act with agility or decisively. Few run their businesses strategically. Yet the most competitive managers in the market know with the right partner and a flexible operating system, you can. Go boldly toward change with SEI Investment Manager Services.
Determination and operational strength are both essential factors for growth in asset management. I'm Steve Meyer, President and Head of SEI's Investment Manager Services Division. We know that disruptive forces create opportunities around the world. If you see potential in change, our industry specialists will maximize SEI's integrated platform of data and risk management, global investment operations, compliance support, and investor services to position your asset management business for success. Come grow with us.
With SEI Investment Manager Services, you lead the charge in a competitive marketplace. Learn more at SEIC.com/seize change.
Business is constantly evolving. Is your financial printer evolving to keep ahead of the curve? At Command Financial, we are redefining financial printing by providing industry-leading expertise, leveraging technology, and honing processes and best practices. Every day, Command helps SEC registrants, as well as members of their working groups, including securities attorneys and investment bankers, prepare, file, and disseminate regulatory and disclosure documents, such as registration statements, M&A documents, and mutual fund prospectuses and reports. Command provides a full range of services to help you effectively complete your deal, meet your disclosure requirements, and achieve your shareholder communications objectives. Visit our website at commandfinancial.com and learn how we're evolving, not only with the times, but also with your business requirements. Command Financial, redefining financial printing.
Had the same job for the last 15 years? Working with the same people, in the same office, drinking tea from the same comedy mug, eating the same crayfish and rocket sandwich every lunchtime, using the same business jargon, and climbing the same greasy pole? What does that even mean? Then maybe it's time to switch it up, starting with the all-new Vauxhall Corsa. With its bold styling and up to 70 miles per gallon. To switch it up, visit your local Vauxhall dealership or search New Corsa. Official WLTP test figures for comparison purposes only. Real-world figures may vary.
Heroes. They're the ones we turn to in our darkest hour. Like when you blow a fuse and the lights go off. Whether it's electrics to heating, plumbing to plastering. At Local Heroes, every job completed by an expert tradesperson comes with a 12-month British Gas guarantee when you pay online. So, if it needs fixing, there's a local hero for that. To get a quote, search Local Heroes. Terms and conditions apply.
5 is in! What a run! Touchdown, Kansas City!
Congratulations to the Kansas City Chiefs on winning their first Super Bowl in 50 years and second in franchise history.
50, Watkins, 10, chase to the 5, into the end zone, touchdown! That may be all she wrote!
While the NFL's 100th season may be over, football never stops on TuneIn. Search NFL Podcast to stay current with all the off-season wheeling and dealing. And get ready for the 2020 NFL Draft in April.
Along the goal line, scores! It takes it home!
Hockey fans, the 2019-20 NHL season is here.
Here's Pietrangelo, he scores!
And you can hear the action live on TuneIn Premium.
Move, hit a shot, faced up!
From regular season action to the All-Star Game and through the Stanley Cup in June. Hear the home and away call for every game, for every team live. At home or on the go, never miss a game with the NHL on TuneIn Premium.
Upgrade today.
Want to hear about the latest and greatest things to listen to on TuneIn? For reminders of the biggest live sports games, debates, and breaking news stories, follow @TuneIn on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram to stay connected with the audio that matters to you.
24 hours a day, on air and at TikTok on Twitter. Powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in over 120 countries. This is Bloomberg Radio. Now, a global news update.
Democratic candidates for president have been racing around the Hawkeye state as Iowa caucuses get underway today. President Trump is set to give his State of the Union address tomorrow night. The next day, senators may acquit Trump in his impeachment trial.
I will vote to acquit. Republican Senator Joni Ernst, speaking on CNN's State of the Union, certainly isn't alone. The vote that will likely come on Wednesday will likely be a vote of acquittal. And, says fellow Republican Lamar Alexander, it probably will be split along party lines. Alexander tells NBC's Meet the Press.
The question for me was, do I need more evidence to conclude that the president did what he did? And I concluded, no.
Linda Kenyon, Washington.
DHS warning airline passengers that their flights may wind up rerouted if officials discover in flight that someone on board has been in China in the last 14 days. The death toll from coronavirus now over 350. I'm John Trout.
Why all the top-tier experts? Because business is not a magic trick.
Give us a sense of the economic backdrop.
Bloomberg Markets.
Which financial records are these?
Weekday mornings at 10 Eastern on Bloomberg Radio. Bloomberg, the world is listening. Markets, headlines, and breaking news 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, the Bloomberg Business app, and on Quick Take by Bloomberg. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
And I'm Karen Moscow. U.S. stock index futures are on the rise, and European stocks are drifting following steep losses at the end of last week and as investors digest the latest developments in the coronavirus outbreak. Shares plunged in China as markets there reopened after a long holiday. We check the markets every 15 minutes throughout the trading day on Bloomberg. S&P futures up 13 points, Dow futures up 96, and NASDAQ futures up 40. The DAX in Germany is up up 0.1% now. 10-year Treasury down 7/30 seconds, yield 1.53%, and the yield on the 2-year 1.33%. NYMEX crude oil is up 0.2% or 11 cents at $51.67 a barrel. COMEX gold is down 0.3% or $4.50 at $15.8340 an ounce. The euro 1.1068 against the dollar, British pound 1.3067, and the yen is at 108.46. And that's a Bloomberg Business Flash. Now here's Michael Barr with more on what's going on around the world. Michael.
Karen, closing arguments are set to start today in President Trump's impeachment trial. With the trial's conclusion on the horizon, President Trump is now turning his attention to tomorrow night's State of the Union address. Meanwhile, for the Democrats, tonight is the Iowa caucuses. Leaked recording of an exchange between an Iranian air traffic controller and an Iranian pilot purports to show that authorities in Iran immediately knew a missile had downed a Ukrainian jetliner after takeoff from Tehran. The missile strike killed all 176 people aboard, despite days of denials by the Islamic Republic. The Kansas City Chiefs have ended a half-century of Super Bowl frustration. The Chiefs defeated the San Francisco 49ers 31-20 last night. On the ice, the Capitals lost. In tennis, Novak Djokovic won the Australian Open. Global news 24 hours a day, on air and on Quick Take by Bloomberg, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. I'm Michael Barr. This is Bloomberg, Nathan.
All right, Michael, thank you. We are live from the Bloomberg Interactive Brokers Studios, where it is 5:49 on Wall Street and 4:49 in Des Moines, Iowa, on this final day of campaigning before the first voting finally happens in the long-running Democratic presidential race. In Bloomberg Radio and Television, Chief Correspondent Kevin Cirilli is live with us from Des Moines ahead of the first in the nation Iowa caucuses. Good morning to you, Kevin. Interesting that this is going to happen the day after the Super Bowl. I wonder, how much bleary-eyed fans are going to be affected by that heading into the caucuses.
They're devoted here in Des Moines. Yesterday I went to a Joe Biden rally, and candidly, it was still going on during kickoff. So I think that there are a lot of voters who take their job very seriously here. There was an Emerson poll that came out yesterday that has Bernie Sanders still leading by a couple of percentage points, followed by Joe Biden. Now it all comes down to organization and momentum, as well as setting expectations. Should Bernie Sanders win tonight, that his supporters are hoping would fuel momentum as we head in to the primary and caucus season. Should Biden not finish second, that would prove to be potentially another storyline that we would be following. And who's going to be the surprise here? I was talking to some Buttigieg staffers just within the last 24 hours, Nathan, and what they tell me is that they're optimistic. However, they're looking at Andrew Yang, and I know that might sound a little peculiar, especially back in Washington, D.C., but there are a lot of Andrew Yang supporters here in Iowa. He's polling at about 9 to 11%. Now, that's not enough in a caucus site to get the 15% threshold, in which case his supporters would have to make a decision on where they want to go. And that's really what I'm watching for tonight. Where do Yang supporters go? Where do Amy Klobuchar supporters go on the second caucus ballot?
Yeah, and it's interesting because we actually did hear and see Andrew Yang on one of the Sunday talk shows that you hear on Bloomberg Radio, ABC's This Week. He was asked directly where he thinks his supporters would go in a second caucus round, and the name he dropped was Bernie Sanders. That is very interesting.
It's very interesting, and it's not what Buttigieg supporters are seeing, and it's not candidly what I'm seeing here when I'm talking to voters. Yesterday, I talked with several Yang supporters who told me Buttigieg was their number 2 choice. Beyond the Buttigieg candidacy and Andrew Yang candidacy, also, of course, look out for Senator Elizabeth Warren. Where does she go from here? Can she pull off an upset? Can she get into the second or third place spot? No one's really expecting her to take one. So all of this now, questions become, and this is the question I get from a lot of my friends back on the East Coast, is why Iowa? Why does it matter? It matters for 3 reasons: momentum, free earned media, and fundraising. Because if you show big in Iowa, you can pick up the phone, call your donors, and say, see that? There's still a chance. There's still a prayer. We need to keep this campaign going.
And in our last minute here, Kevin, what do those 3 factors mean specifically for Elizabeth Warren, who will be heading into New Hampshire, which you would think would be home territory for her, with the state just being one away from Massachusetts?
Well, it's a big deal. She's got to be able, her campaign has to be able tonight to see some glimmer of hope. Because, as you know, and as we've been reporting on, her poll numbers have dipped. And Bernie Sanders really appears to have all the momentum. Here on the ground in Des Moines, Sanders momentum, you feel it, and they're everywhere. His supporters are everywhere. So, again, he's got a lot of expectations to win big tonight.
Yeah, and that's interesting as well, because New Hampshire could also be seen as home territory for Bernie Sanders when he's a home state away on Vermont. Bloomberg chief Washington correspondent.
Getting some coffee.
Yeah, go do that. We'll hear back from you a little bit later on here on Bloomberg Daybreak. And, of course, we are going to have full coverage of the Iowa caucuses on Bloomberg Radio and television. You can hear that beginning at 10 p.m. Wall Street time. And a special edition of Bloomberg Sound On with Kevin Cirilli is coming up from Des Moines. That's at 5 p.m. Wall Street time. Yeah, he's going to need that coffee on Bloomberg Radio. Karen?
All right, Nathan, thank you. It is 5:53 on Wall Street. It's time for the Bloomberg Law Report. Let's get to the legal stories we're watching this morning from Bloomberg's Jeff Bellinger.
An IRS official said over the weekend that the tax agency and the Treasury are trying to finish regulations tied to the 2017 tax law as quickly as possible. The Treasury may lean on smaller, more focused guidance in the race to complete the job. A Department of Justice official says the agency is focused on finding individuals who hide their money from the IRS by using foreign accounts. Increased cooperation with other governments is helping. The First Circuit ruled a former Harvard University professor did not prove that sex bias was behind the fact that she was denied tenure.
Bloomberg Law. Everything you need on one legal research platform. guidance, analysis, and Bloomberg Market Intelligence. Find out more at BloombergLaw.com.
And now another legal story we're watching. Celebrity attorney Michael Avenatti on the defensive in a federal trial in Manhattan. Prosecutors say Avenatti tried to extort as much as $25 million from Nike at the expense of a client with serious allegations against the company. Avenatti claims this was a case of negotiation, not extortion. For more on the trial, Bloomberg's June Grasso speaks with former federal prosecutor Robert Mintz, a partner at McCarter & English.
Explain the case against Avenatti.
What prosecutors have alleged in this case is that Avenatti demanded that a whistleblower client of his be paid $1.5 million from Nike, and then also, allegedly without his own client's knowledge, he also demanded that he and fellow attorney Mark Garagos, who is not charged in the case, be paid between $15 million and $25 million to conduct an internal investigation of Nike of the very allegations that were made by his whistleblower client.
So the defense says that it's not extortion because you use harsh language in negotiating for a client. This wasn't extortion. This wasn't fraud. That was litigation.
What made this case unusual and what drew the attention of Nike's outside counsel was that Avenatti was also allegedly requiring Nike, as part of its settlement, to hire him to conduct an investigation on behalf of Nike. It's extremely unusual to be adverse to a client and at the same time ask as a component of a settlement that that company hire you to do additional legal work.
So it's extremely unusual, but is it illegal?
Well, according to prosecutors, it is. The prosecutors have argued that this is essentially fraud and a shakedown because what Avenatti was doing, according to the government, was threatening to go public with these allegations right before March Madness, which is a time where there's a focus on basketball and a lot of Nike fans are paying attention at that point. And it was also a time that Nike was about to have its earnings announcement. So the threat, according to prosecutors, was timed perfectly in order to damage Nike's market capitalization potentially by billions of dollars.
The defense attorney said that the SEC is looking into these allegations against Nike. Does that help Avenatti's case in any way?
Oh, sure, it absolutely does. If you're the defense in this case, you want this case to be all about Nike and all about the allegations that somebody at Nike was paying young basketball players and they're paying their families, which would be illegal, as a way of funneling money to them in the hopes that they would continue to wear Nike sneakers as their career progressed through college and perhaps even into the NBA. That's what the defense wants the case about, and prosecutors will fight vigorously for the jury to focus not on that allegation, but on Avenatti's conduct.
And as Robert Mintz, a partner at McCarter & English, speaking with Bloomberg's June Grasso. Catch more of that interview, plus analysis of the latest legal news, by subscribing to the Bloomberg Law Podcast or downloading the show at Bloomberg.com/podcast. And attorneys can find exceptional legal research and business development tools at BloombergLaw.com. And futures are higher this morning. S&P futures up 12 points. Dow futures up 90. NASDAQ futures up 38. The 10-year Treasury down 6/32, yield 1.52%. And the yield on the 2-year, 1.33%. And Bloomberg Daybreak continues. This is Bloomberg.
Influential.
The UK has now left the EU, and we're in a transition period until the end of the year. Throughout this period, the government will be forging new partnerships with the EU and the rest of the world. This could lead to new arrangements for trade, travel, and business. To find out about the changes and how they might affect you, go to gov.uk/transition.
At Ring, we've reinvented the doorbell. So no matter where you are or what time of day, you can watch over your home and the things you care about. Ring Video Doorbell streams HD video and two-way talk straight to your phone, so you can speak to whoever's at your door from anywhere.
Delivery.
Oh, great. Could you leave it with my neighbour, please?
Sure, no problem.
And it's so simple, you can install it yourself in minutes. See, hear and speak to whoever's at your door from wherever you are with Ring Video Doorbell. Available at ring.com and selected retailers.
Do you go on the same holiday every year? To the same country, in the same hotel, with the same sea view, visit the same ancient monuments, lay by the same dolphin-shaped pool, meet the same Barrys and Sandras, and wear the same Hawaiian shirt that you'd never wear at home. Then maybe it's time to switch it up, starting with the all-new Vauxhall Corsa, with its bold styling and up to 70 miles per gallon. To switch it up, visit your local Vauxhall dealership or search New Corsa. Official WLTP test figures for comparison purposes only. Real-world figures may vary.
4 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, on the Bloomberg Business app, and on Quick Take by Bloomberg. This is Bloomberg Radio.
Live from the Bloomberg Interactive Brokers Studios, this is Bloomberg Daybreak for Monday, February 3rd, 2020. Coming up this hour.
Chinese stocks plunge as investors get their first chance to sell after the Lunar New Year holiday.
Fears over the coronavirus spread as the death toll and confirmed cases accelerate.
And it's a big week for U.S. politics as the first-in-the-nation vote gets underway in Iowa.
President Trump prepares for tomorrow's State of the Union address as his impeachment trial continues. I'm Michael Barr. More ahead.
I'm Rob Bushka. Coming up in sports, the Chiefs rally to win their first Super Bowl in 50 years, and Tom Brady has more left in the tank.
That's all straight ahead on Bloomberg Daybreak. On Bloomberg 1130 New York, Bloomberg 99.1 Washington, D.C., Bloomberg 106.1 Boston, Bloomberg 960 San Francisco, Sirius XM 119, and around the world on BloombergRadio.com and via the Bloomberg Business app.
Good morning, I'm Karen Moscow.
I'm Nathan Hager. Bloomberg Daybreak brought to you by IBKR, the professional's gateway to the world's markets. Their clients enjoy lowest cost access to stocks, options, futures, Forex, and fixed income from a single integrated account. Learn more at IBKR.com.
U.S. futures are gaining to start the week. It is 6:01 on Wall Street, and we check the markets every 15 minutes throughout the trading day on Bloomberg. S&P futures up 14 points. Dow futures up 104. NASDAQ futures up 44. The DAX in Germany is up 0.2%. CAC in Paris up 0.25%, and the FTSE 100 up 0.5%. 10-year Treasury down 6/32, yield 1.52%, and the yield on the 2-year 1.33%. NYMEX crude oil is up 0.4% or 21 cents at 51.77 a barrel. COMEX gold is down about 0.2% or $2.60 at 15.8520 an ounce. The euro 1.1066 against the dollar. The yen 108.42. Nathan.
Karen, we begin in Asia, where Chinese stocks led declines in the region on fears over the coronavirus. The benchmark gauge in Shanghai plunged nearly 8% as investors hit the panic button in their first day back from the holiday. Bloomberg's Juliette Sally joins us from Singapore now with details. Good morning, Juliette.
Good morning, Nathan and Karen. The CSI 300 closed lower by 7.8% to 3,688 points, its biggest one-day drop since the equity bubble burst in August of 2015. On the open, all three major Chinese indexes shed more than 9% before some buyers stepped in after the PBOC cut rates and injected liquidity into the system. More than 2,600 stocks in China fell by the 10% daily limit, while the onshore yuan tumbled more than 1%. In commodities, China's benchmark iron ore contract declined by its daily limit of 8%, while crude and palm oil also sank by the maximum allowed. In Singapore, I'm Juliette Sally, Bloomberg Daybreak.
Julia, thank you. Officials in China tried to ward off panic by injecting liquidity. Still, the sell-off was dramatic, and Willem Sells is chief market strategist at HSBC.
In the short term, we're not yet buyers. We think that there is just too much uncertainty at this point in time. Part of the correction that we've had is a correction from excessive rally in December and January.
While the longevity of the outbreak remains unclear, there's little doubt it will drag on China's growth. About 2/3 of the economy remains shut this week.
Crude has sold off sharply since the virus emerged, and sources in China's energy industry now tell us oil demand has dropped by 20% of total consumption. We get more from Bloomberg's Steven Stapczynski in Singapore.
Overall, their demand has stalled at 3 million barrels a day, and it's affecting the market. But if China were to bring back that demand, and if this were to recover quickly, traders in the market are telling me that you could quickly see prices jump back up if that were to happen.
Citigroup slashing its forecast for oil, saying Brent could fall as low as $47 a barrel. Right now, it's at $56.58. That's little change to lower. West Texas Intermediate is higher by 0.5% or 29 cents to $51.85.
At last count, the death toll from the virus passed 360, with confirmed cases jumping past 17,000. Stephen Morrison is Director of Global Health Policy at the Center for Strategic and International Studies.
this was approaching a true pandemic, and that's the language that's being used right now. There's a sense that the numbers of truly infected within China are grossly underestimated. We know that the transmissibility is very, very fast. This is going to scale and move beyond China in all likelihood.
The Philippines is reporting the first death from the virus outside of China. California has confirmed 2 new cases, bringing total infections in the U.S. to 11.
Meantime, China's kickstarting a clinical trial to test a drug for the virus. A new antiviral from Gilead Sciences will be tested by a medical team from a hospital in Beijing, and shares of Gilead are higher by 14% in early trading.
Pressure is building on President Xi Jinping to contain the outbreak. He's taken personal control of the response, enacting measures like the quarantine of more than 50 million people. Max Baucus is former U.S. ambassador to China.
President Xi also knows he's kind of under the gun now. So the people of China and also the people around the world, especially the people in China, will be looking at him. Is he going to handle this well? Is he going to be our guy that we can trust in the future? And it depends on how well he handles it.
At the same time, Beijing is blasting the U.S. for its reaction to the virus. The foreign ministry says American authorities have inappropriately overreacted and not provided much help to counter the outbreak.
President Trump's pushing back against that, saying he did offer assistance. He also tells Fox News the U.S. is ramping up efforts to stop the virus from entering the country.
We can't have people coming in who may have this problem, the coronavirus. So we're going to see what happens, but we did shut it down.
11 U.S. airports are currently accepting flights carrying citizens who visited China. They'll conduct enhanced screening for the virus as part of new restrictions that took effect yesterday.
As political pressure builds on President Xi and China, it's also a big week for U.S. politics. Tonight, Iowa holds the first-in-the-nation vote for Democratic candidates to take on President Trump. Bloomberg's David Weston is in Iowa for tonight's caucuses and brings us a preview from the Hawkeye State.
Right now, it looks like Bernie Sanders has been gathering momentum as we go into these caucuses, and he is thought to at least have a lot of passion behind him, which is terribly important, particularly in these caucuses, because they all get together and try to persuade one another. And some people would say, also, do they want to win? Because they want to win. A lot of people think that's not necessarily to go to the extremes. It's more to go down the center. And that's one of the big issues that's being debated out here in Iowa is who's the most electable. Maybe we should go with Joe Biden, even if we're not as excited about him, because we think he can beat Donald Trump, as opposed to something like a Bernie Sanders or Mary Elizabeth Warren we are excited about. We're not sure they can beat him.
And Bloomberg's David Weston reporting on the ground in Iowa. He'll also anchor our live coverage of tonight's caucuses. Catch that at 10 p.m. Wall Street time on Bloomberg Radio and television. And futures are higher this morning. S&P futures up 17 points. Dow futures up 126. Straight ahead, the latest world and national news. And this is Bloomberg.
All right, Karen, thank you. It's 6:07 on Wall Street. Let's bring in Michael Barr to get more on what's going on around the world. Good morning, Michael.
Good morning, Nathan. President Donald Trump is set to give his State of the Union address tomorrow night in the Capitol, where his impeachment trial is still underway. Trump has become just the third president in U.S. history to be impeached, but he's expected to be acquitted in his Senate trial on Wednesday. On CBS's Face the Nation, lead House impeachment manager Adam Schiff said that he and his team will still continue with their arguments against the president.
I'm not letting the senators off the hook. We're still going to go into the Senate this week and make the case why this president needs to be removed. It will be up to the senators to make that final judgment, and the senators will be held accountable for it.
CBS's Face the Nation can be heard Sundays on Bloomberg Radio. Meanwhile, Republican Senator Lamar Alexander, who voted against having witnesses in the trial, said President Trump called the president of Ukraine and asked him to become involved in investigating Joe Biden. Alexander also says that the president delayed the military and other assistance to Ukraine in order to encourage that investigation.
He shouldn't have done it. And I said he shouldn't have done it. And now I think it's up to the American people to say, okay, good economy.